The wonderful day had arrived that would change Rebecca's life forever, a beautiful moment that turned into a living hell. Jeffrey dropped to one knee, opened the box and asked the girl if she would be his most beautiful creation. "Jeffrey!" Rebecca exclaimed admiringly, blindly in love with this handsome young man. She answered his proposal yes. Even if she was reborn several times, she would still become his wife. The day she accepted his proposal, believing it was love, Rebecca became one of Jeffrey's works of art. The man fastened a necklace around her neck, which looked more like a shackle collar. And he told his wife that she was truly beautiful. He said that he knew it would suit her. "How about this too?" the man asked. Everything seemed to suit her, so he couldn't choose. But then Rebecca turned to Jeffrey, informing him that she had received an invitation to the party and asked if she could go. The girl modestly said that after the wedding she hardly saw her friends, and therefore she would like to. At that moment, Jeffrey interrupted his wife, refusing, because he only allowed her to go to parties that he also went to. That's right, he only allowed her to go if he went with her. But then he didn't let her talk to other people. "Enough, stop it." He shut her up and asked the maid what she was worth, ordering her to bring other jewelry. And it was like this all the time. After the wedding, Jeffrey isolated Rebecca, not allowing her to see anyone. She was only allowed to live as a beautifully decorated doll for her husband. And then one day she was told the news of her own pregnancy, and then Rebecca understood that if a child is born into this environment, then he, like her, will live locked up in a mansion. Rebecca couldn't allow her child to live like a soulless doll, so she ran away into the night. For the first time in her life, she went against him. Her previously gentle, aristocratic hands had become rough from work, and her face had also begun to deteriorate little by little. And yet she was happy for the first time in a long time. She felt freedom. She felt that a bright future awaited her and her child. But tragedy comes at the happiest moment. One day, when she was sleeping, someone lit candles. A terrifyingly familiar voice called her name tenderly, running his hand over her cheek. He knew she was not sleeping. The girl jumped up in alarm to make sure her hearing wasn't failing her. And I saw in front of me a man who sent shivers down my spine when I looked at him, Jeffrey. Her husband said tenderly that she was truly naive and asked if she thought he wouldn't find her. Finally, their masterpiece was born. These words hit the heart like a blade. Everything inside sank. Psyche, at that very moment, exclaimed and called her daughter, the alarmed Rebecca. The baby was not in the crib, and the girl began to demand an explanation from Jeffrey about where her Psyche was. "Don't worry," the man said, waving his hand and asking if he would really harm his work of art. He couldn't leave his work of art in such a dilapidated place. After looking the woman over, Jeffrey said he couldn't believe she had ruined her appearance so much. Unable to bear his touch, Rebecca waved him away and desperately rushed to search for Psyche. But running out of the room, she heard footsteps from the second floor, and then a sweet girl with her child in her arms. "Lady Rebecca?" the girl asked in surprise, the woman standing in a stupor at the sight of Alicia. Looking at the girl, Rebecca asked her in shock why Psyche was in her arms. "Is it she?" the woman asked in horror. "Is it really she who betrayed her, Alicia?" she exclaimed. "She trusted her." The girl explained to Lady Rebecca with alarm, saying that she too had no choice. "Shut up," the mother screamed, "and give Psyche back immediately." But then the enraged woman was stopped by her husband, who asked where she was going. Jeffrey violently threw her back into the room and suggested that his wife must have lost her mind. "Well," the monster said with cruelty and mockery, "he has already found a replacement for her, so everything is fine. Then he will probably go, because he needs to go to the Duke's funeral. But wait!" Rebecca screamed, demanding that Psyche be given back. But then Jeffrey pushes the woman away from him again, ordering her to get out. However, to his misfortune, the woman was ready to fight for her child and, as if in a rage, bit his hand. At first, he still didn't understand the scale of what had happened and simply reflexively pushed the crazy woman away. And the next moment he screamed in pain, bleeding and trembling with fear and pain. He could not formulate words. He just exclaimed, "How dare she bite him?" And Rebecca, spitting blood, stood up again. He said, frightened, considering their feelings for each other in the past. He wanted to save her life, but changed his mind. Jeffrey yelled at Rebecca that she asked for it and slammed the door, locking her in the room. Jeffrey, breaking his voice, called to him Rebecca banging on the door and ordered him to open the door immediately. Then suddenly Jeffrey coldly told Rebecca that she was his best doll, but it seemed like it was time to get rid of her. With the words that the man got everything he wanted from her, a fire broke out and flames broke through the cracks in the door. Rebecca sat down on the floor, in a place where oxygen was retained. She thought she had succeeded. But it seemed she hadn't been able to completely escape from Jeffrey, the woman thought, giving up. At least once before her death, Rebecca thought, if she could return one more time, then she would definitely breathe her last breath. Heavy eyelids opened with difficulty, like that moment when you haven't had enough sleep and your mother keeps waking you up. But suddenly she opens her eyes in alarm, realizing, or rather not realizing, whether this is a dream or what it is. The painfully familiar maid asked Madame if she was okay, assuming that she was not feeling well that day. Rebecca couldn't understand why Alice was here. It would be nice if all this was cancelled, the maid said. Rebecca knew for sure that Alice had died a long time ago at the hands of Jeffrey. Could this really be heaven? She thought when she saw The Walking Dead. Although it would be a little unpleasant, Alice asked Madame to be patient for a little while. It would get better later. Today, Rebecca thought, dumbfounded, not understanding what the hell is going on today. When she went outside, she saw a beautifully decorated courtyard, flowers, glasses, a buffet, and now Rebecca realized that this was not heaven, but hell. The music was loud, drowning out all the other noises around her, but she couldn't stifle the thoughts racing through her head. Thus Rebecca returned to her own lived past, which she so desperately desired when she was dying. But this damn past brought her back to the very day when everything went to hell, to her husband's second wedding and his second war. And it was a beautiful and romantic wedding, Rebecca thought as she watched the newlyweds. It's a pity, of course, that this was her husband's second wedding. May the goddess Defina bless this marriage, said the priest, and he pronounced them husband and wife. To a burst of applause, the newlyweds stepped forward, and Jeffrey's gaze caught on his wife standing alone. And grinning, he ordered his wife to smile in his usual narcissistic tone. Seeing that lousy expression on Rebecca's face made her realize it was real. She really did go back to the past. She first met Alicia during her daily walk around the grounds. Her condition was extremely serious, and Rebecca simply could not pass by. So she brought her to the mansion and looked after her diligently, becoming the girl's savior. When she woke up after the treatment, she was so beautiful that she caught herself thinking that she was capable of charming anyone. And, as if to confirm this, she immediately lost her head over her. Rebecca felt lonely after the wedding and separation from her friends, so she took her in as her maid. And since then, thanks to kind Alicia, she was no longer alone in this lousy place. However, this fleeting moment of joy did not last even a year. Something happened during dinner in honor of Alicia's birthday. Alicia dropped her fork from her hand and timidly told Lady Rebecca that she didn't want to eat, the puzzle in her head instantly coming together. Rebecca immediately realized that Alicia was pregnant. The one she trusted and valued was carrying her husband's child. Out of anger and despair, she ran to Jeffrey and asked how he could, not with just anyone, but with Alicia. The self-admiring narcissist grinned and tenderly called his wife naive. He asked, after the handsome man met the woman, if she really thought that nothing like this would happen. Moving towards his doll, Jeffrey said that it was not his fault and not even Alicia's fault. He was like a maniac, putting it into her head that it was her fault that she had left a beautiful woman within his reach. Hiding her rising anger, Rebecca asked what he planned to do then. And Jeffrey asked thoughtfully, "Didn't it turn out well?" As she herself knew, they had been unable to have a child for more than 10 years. And thus Alicia became Jeffrey's second wife. At that moment, Rebecca thought it was all her fault, but now she knew that it was not her fault at all. However, this terrible wedding was still the same as in past memories. It really did return to the past. And her precious child, Psyche, all this was before she was born. The memories of carrying her in her womb for several months were still vivid in her head, and although it didn't last that long, she clearly remembered the time when they were happy together. Soft cheeks and small, wiggling hands, right up until the very last moment. Rage was surging inside her, but Rebecca let out a breath. On the contrary, it was all for the best. This way, the child won't have to live the same life as she did when she fell into Jeffrey's hands. Rebecca didn't know why she had returned to the past, but she clenched her fists and thought she knew one thing for sure. Jeffrey Devonshire, now it was his turn to be broken. She would achieve a different result and not repeat her past fate. A man emerging from a dark forest saw a carriage driving towards him. Together with his friend, the man let the moving carriage pass and looked at the person inside. An image of a crying woman appeared in a small window, something the man had never seen before. However, he was familiar with the girl in the carriage, which is probably why he was surprised by her sudden emotions. But the next moment the man heard soft stomping and a cat's meow. Following the men out of the forest came a cat named Leo. Leo jumped on her shoulder and asked her in a caressing manner if he was interested in the woman. "No, it's just," he replied, looking after the carriage. He had previously considered her a corpse without emotions and did not expect that she was capable of such emotions. "Are you in love?" asked the cat, and the man, taken aback, asked him what he was doing. And anyway, didn't he tell him to stop reading his mind? And Leo didn't want to read it, he was just too loud, so he couldn't help himself. Besides, the Count always accompanied her everywhere, so why was she traveling alone, he reasoned. The man turned to Claude. "Yes, Duke," the young man replied. He asked what the hell the Earl of Devonshire was doing on his territory. Claude gasped and remembered that they were on the battlefield, and that the poet did not know that the Earl of Devonshire had taken a second wife. They say that today on the coast of Valeria a wedding was held between them, which, the Duke interrupted him, that is, he wants to tell him. What is happening now on his territory? Such a disgusting farce as a wedding, and even in his favorite place. In anger, he ordered Claude to immediately drive them out and never let them into that area again. He gave the deadline for execution until tomorrow, and the young man timidly replied that he would immediately carry out his order. And so Rebecca returned to the Devonshire mansion again, and remembered what she was doing at that time. Although she was a countess, she had nothing to do in this mansion. She was the mistress, but Geoffrey deliberately avoided talking about what belonged to her. The duties of the mistress of the house, he said, were enough for her to simply be there, like a beautiful flower. He handled all the difficult matters, and in this mansion she was just a perfect doll. But then Rebecca turned her attention to the Palace of Light, the place that Geoffrey loved most. Devonshire has been renowned for its deep love of art for generations, collecting incredible works over the years. They even built a separate building where the temperature and humidity were controlled for their storage. The Devonshire's love of art was almost manic, but what if it destroyed this place? What would Geoffrey's face be like then? Just the thought of it made the day brighter. If she could do it, it would be wonderful. But it is impossible to destroy such a carefully guarded place, and now she has no strength, nothing. If she had had a secure parental home, she would have divorced long ago, but her family went bankrupt shortly after the wedding. And so she barely stayed afloat, relying on the county of Devonshire. If only she had strength. Then Rebecca could have prevented Alicia from becoming a second wife. It was particularly sunny today, and Alice asked the lady to be careful not to get sunburned. Rebecca happily thanked Alice for becoming her good friend. Alice. She was the only person who thought about her in this suffocating county. In her past life, when Alicia gave birth to a child, she secretly took her to the village festival. Everything was done to lift her spirits, and, thanks to her, she spent happy hours for the first time in a long time. However, the retribution for this was severe. While beating her, the Count asked how she dared to secretly take her away to who knows where. But no matter how she tried to stop Geoffrey, Alice, lying in a pool of her own blood, died before her eyes. Rebecca was deeply indebted to Alice and asked her if she had any wish, and if it was in her power, she would grant it. "Wish?" the girl asked again and said, "Her wish is to spend peaceful days with Madame, just like now." "Don't say that," Rebecca asked her to tell her honestly. "Maybe it's jewelry or she needs a raise." Taken aback, a grateful Alice dropped the umbrella from her hands and said that she really didn't need anything. Alice admitted that she simply wanted to be Madame's eternal bodyguard. "Alice," she said painfully, thinking how good it was that she had returned to the time when Alice was still alive. Rebecca thanked Alice. She really was the only one who was on her side and suggested going back inside. Already in the mansion, Rebecca thought, well, Geoffrey's room and office are on the 3rd floor. Geoffrey didn't allow anyone to approach the 3rd floor because he wanted to look down on everything alone. The 3rd floor, where his room and office were located, no one could go up there, and no one entered it, including her. The office was always tightly locked. That's probably where everything connected with the Count was kept. Maybe that's where she'd find his weak spot. But as soon as she took a step towards the stairs, a guard blocked the passage. After all, from this place onwards entry was prohibited someday, Rebecca thought, and replied that she knew. Rebecca headed to her own room, and Alice noticed Madame looking at the door. So, returning to the room and being alone, Alice asked Madame if she wanted to go to the office. She was just looking at the third-floor stairs and asked if she could help her. Rebecca immediately remembered how Alice had persuaded her in the past to go to the festival, promising that no one would know. And remembering perfectly well the terrible consequences, she nervously refused, worried that she might be punished. The Count had gone away on his honeymoon for a week anyway, and wouldn't be back until then. Now, with the guard down, this was their chance. Now the third floor is guarded by only one guard. She will distract him and take him to the kitchen, and at that time she will make her way into the office. Alice thought that she was probably lonely after the Count's departure, and she wanted to take a book to read, asking him to rely on her. Rebecca hesitated, but Alice was right. When else would there be such a perfect chance? And so, according to Alice's plan, Rebecca found herself in her husband's previously unknown office. Thanks to Alice, she actually entered the office in her past life. She had never entered here. It was necessary to find something that could be used as pressure and weakness in Jeffrey. Opening the drawer, she found documents with familiar names. The Obelia family. This concerned her family. Date. The Obelia family secures title to their land. Date. The Obelia family's business closes. And date. Additional debts are incurred. These documents describe the process of how Jeffrey had financially ruined her family even before he proposed to her. Yes, although Obelia's family was not noble, it was not one that would go bankrupt so quickly, and this was not the only thing that threw her off track. Here were kept the sworn letters written by her friends, Diana, Leona, which they threw to her because he forced them to do so. It was said that the father-in-law again asked for money, constantly relying on him, but since Rebecca obeyed him well, he could very well lend him money. Friends don't get in touch, which means they're tired of her. He already said that she has a bad tendency to get attached to people, but that's okay. She has him. This means that she knew all those words that he said then, that Jeffrey wanted to tie her to himself by force. But she didn't even think that innocent people around her were suffering because of this. Rebecca simply screamed in despair. In a burning resentment, she clutched the sheets of paper and cursed Jeffrey, that son of a bitch. But suddenly, the office door swung open and a worried Jeffrey ran into the room. "What's going on here?" he asked his distraught wife, whom he found hysterical on the floor. "Jeffrey Devonshire," she said through her teeth, grabbing the papers and shouting, asking what he had done to her. "It's dangerous," the man said as the sheets fell to the floor. She could damage his beautiful face with the paper. And picking up the document, he gasped with relief and said, "She saw it well. Nothing special." "Nothing special?" Rebecca asked, suppressing her rage. "Ruining her family and threatening her friends is nothing special." Jeffrey chuckled and asked Rebecca to look deeper, convincing her that this was all for her sake, and that these friends were not right for her from the very beginning. He should have immediately made friends within his own circle, and to say that he ruined her family is a bit unfair. Could he really do this to the one he values most? He helped her father. Have you forgotten he was the one who lent him money when he was having difficulties? "Let go," Rebecca cried. In a past life, she would have easily believed his words, but when she saw these documents, she understood. He was clearly determined to destroy her family, first hiring a fraudulent businessman to gain her father's trust. And his father, having invested in a profitable business, lost a huge amount of money, and then Jeffrey, like a savior, lent his father money without any conditions. But in order to get the money back, the father again invested in a fake business, so the debts grew and the Obelia family could not get out of the trap. It cannot be said that her father was entirely innocent, but this man intended to deceive him from the very beginning. He understood that she was rebelling because he had taken a second wife, but he also advised her to behave quietly, otherwise he will kill Alice. He already knew her weakness. And then the husband asked his beloved wife to give him an answer, clenching her fists until they trembled. She said, "I understand." "Okay," Jeffrey agreed good-naturedly. Today he would be generous and turn a blind eye to it. Perhaps it was the shock of seeing the documents, but she was seriously ill for the next few days. When Rebecca finally felt better, she opened her eyes. And right away she was met by a smiling Alicia, who exclaimed that she had woken up. Rebecca asked if she had been looking after her, wondering why she had also returned to the mansion. Alicia replied, yes, she was so worried, thinking that something had happened to her. Lady Rebecca, But it was precisely because of this warmth that in her past life she could not hate Alicia. Unaware that behind that smile lurked an ugly, writhing greed, she had fallen for Alicia's tricks many times because of that sweet smile. At first it was jewelry and dresses, and then she took away her support, and in the end, even her husband, she took everything away from her. When she fled the county, she would not have been able to leave if Alicia had not secretly opened the gate for her. So she thought that Alicia at least a little, but sincerely cared about her, but in the end, true, in reality she was simply helping her because she was eager to take the place of the first wife. Worried, Alicia asked Rebecca if she hated her, or should she love her, she thought. Of course she despised her. She still clearly remembered how she had dug her vile fingers into Psyche, but she replied, of course not. Why would she hate her? You see, Alicia pointed out, she is speaking to her formally again, which she never did before, that's right. She hates her because she took the count away from her. Almost in tears, she told Lady Rebecca that she too could not do anything, and here again was that phrase that she had uttered before Rebecca's death. And okay, this hit Rebecca's psyche, but then Alicia exclaimed that a powerless servant could not refuse the count. Enough! She shut her up coldly, explaining that that was why she had given her another choice the day she found out she was pregnant. Rebecca had told her to run. She promised to find her a home and give her enough money to last her the rest of her life. She wanted this for her own good. She saw what happened to her. Jeffrey would do the same to her, but Alicia said that she was already an adult. And asking to stop communicating with her, as with a child, she said she will make decisions concerning her child and her life herself. Rebecca asked if she had forgotten, reminding her that it was her choice alone. She said that she was an adult and was responsible for her own choices. Remembering this, the girl shuddered, unable to find words of justification, but Rebecca suggested ending it there. Since that's how it turned out, there's no point in feuding. Their husband won't like it. Alicia sadly agreed. Good, Rebecca thought, if she was still blinded by greed. By the way, she suddenly said, and thanked her for looking after her, deciding to give her a gift as a token of gratitude. Opening the box, Rebecca asked to choose something from here, though. Alicia asked hesitantly, coming closer. Her gaze immediately caught on one beautiful and striking piece of jewelry. My God, how beautiful, she said. And his hand was already raised for the necklace, but Rebecca snatched it away quickly and, as if surprised, asked what it was doing here. It was a family heirloom that Jeffrey had given her, so she couldn't give it to him and suggested he choose another one. Alicia asked if she could have it then. Got it, she thought with a smirk. And she answered proudly that only a countess could receive it, so she didn't know if a second wife could receive the same. That's right, Alicia. Know your place and desire what you can't have. Suddenly, the countess's husband entered the room and asked for Rebecca, so she was with Alicia. Luckily, nothing was stolen, he said, but her dry skin irritated him. He advised her to court her properly if she was going to attend the victory banquet in the war. To the banquet? Asked Rebecca, and then Alicia exclaimed, a banquet means there will be a party. She was going to a party for the first time, and then she would need a dress, so she asked the Count which one would suit her. Jeffrey asked Alicia what she was talking about and explained that she didn't need to go to the banquet. This event was organized by the Emperor himself, and she cannot go there because she is a commoner. He asked her not to make such a face, promising in return to give her her favorite jewelry. He asked her to play with them and sit quietly at home, then Alicia demanded to give her the relic. The relic, he asked Rebecca. And the gasping girl explained that she was grateful to Alicia for leaving and offered her to choose something, accidentally showing her the relic. Sighing heavily, the Count, irritated, explained to Alicia that only the Countess, that is, the first wife, could receive this. Why, she was hysterical like a child. She is also a countess. They are officially married. Not wanting to make a scene in front of his wife, he suggested that she go outside and talk, but then Rebecca stopped them with a question. And I asked these two why they returned from their honeymoon so early. Jeffrey and Alicia were definitely on their honeymoon for a week, something that never happened in their previous life, so why did they return so early? And what do you think? Alicia asked, snorting. Is it all because this noble count sold the villa to the Duke for just a few paintings? Alicia, what kind of impudent speech is this? Jeffrey muttered angrily and ordered her to leave immediately, slamming the door behind him. The Duke then, that is Duke Johannes, yeah, that means he is the imperial banquet. This time she will gladly go there. Finally, she has a chance to take the first step towards revenge. Having gathered herself, Rebecca called Jeffrey, who, standing up, told his wife that she was truly beautiful. The girl thanked her husband, clenching her hands into fists. But, looking at her now, Jeffrey remembered the party in honor of his 17th birthday. 17 years ago, in winter, young Jeffrey walked out of a party hall out of sheer boredom. But suddenly I heard some noise and laughter from below. 3 girls were cheerfully playing snowballs. And among them he saw that same sweet girl, whose cheeks were warmed by the frost. Her beautiful face and sweet laugh were forever imprinted in Jeffrey's memory. Soon Rebecca also caught a close look from above, looking at the object of observation. An incredibly handsome young man stood on the balcony of the mansion, looking in her direction in amazement. And the young maiden also could not contain her interest in the handsome guy. She smiled enthusiastically at the Earl of Devonshire's son, and her heavenly eyes sparkled. On that cold winter day, his monotonous life gained purpose for the first time. What an incredibly beautiful child will be born if he marries this beautiful maiden. Beauty is the meaning of his life, so the beautiful Rebecca must become the perfect doll to complete his kingdom. Although, of course, Rebecca turned out to be smarter and more stubborn than he expected. But now she has become a woman who obediently looks only at him and relies on him alone. Almost 10 years that he spent on taming her were not in vain. He did not come to the young and beautiful Alicia for no reason. So keep comparing yourself to her and sharpening your beauty, Rebecca. From now on, if she is as beautiful and obedient as she is, everything will be perfect. And when she gives birth to a child who looks like him, his beautiful kingdom will be completely completed. At the same time, in the Duchy of Johannes, the Duke asked Claude if there was any more useful news. Lately, storytellers have been flocking to the scent of money, saying that it takes days just to weed out the strange types. And also, the assistant added, he needed to change clothes quickly. The main character couldn't miss the victory banquet. But if the Duke had known that this would happen, that he would not have gone to war, Claude asked who said that his fist was itching with the desire to go there. It was only a war in words, but as soon as they drew their swords, they immediately surrendered. It was obvious that the Emperor had planned everything, but there was something strange from the very beginning. So what? He asked him to visit at least once in recognition of the efforts made in his absence. If he continues to test the patience of His Majesty's, a great misfortune may occur. So what kind? Leo asked. As long as that damned goddess favored their family, even the Emperor would not be able to touch them, the Duke explained. The noble ducal family of Johannes, who received the blessing of the goddess Daphina, which protected the family, was in fact a curse. Long ago, Johannes's ancestor, having received a revelation from the goddess, united with the rebels in a civil war and became their leader. Under the protection of the goddess, a new emperor ascended the throne, and the new emperor granted Johannes, his chief companion, the title of Duke. Temples were erected throughout the country in honor of the goddess, and cats were sent as messengers and a symbol that the goddess was watching over them. Perhaps due to their endless wealth and fame, Johannes's descendants gradually forgot about the goddess's supervision and went so far as to commit the sin of debauchery in the temple. As a result, the blessing she had once bestowed turned into a curse, and he and his descendants had to pay for the blessing she had given by protecting her messengers. Since then, the souls of Johannes's children were connected with the cats sent by the goddess, after which they began to share even pain and feelings. The curse sometimes even took the lives of children the cat sent by God, fed only on the divine power of the air. So heirs with weak divine power died early, and in the duchy, in order to somehow continue the line, they married off heirs from an early age, forcing them to give birth to heirs. And if the first wife couldn't quickly give birth to a child, they continued to take new wives, and Julian was no exception. The father told his son that he was born with the strongest divine power among all the heirs. Therefore, he must produce as many heirs as possible so that even if one dies, he can continue to protect the holy being. The boy angrily asked if he wanted to tell him to continue dragging innocent women into this curse. He didn't want that. He said this just now, but he too will soon understand that this curse cannot be gotten rid of. The boy was scared, but did not want to put up with all this injustice. And one day his mother told Julian that he should never fall in love. And before he had time to properly mourn his mother, the Duke introduced his new mother to his son, ordering him to say hello. "Get married as soon as possible," he asked Claude, and told him to tell his parents not to make him laugh. He had no intention of meekly accepting this terrible fate, but if he did not produce an heir, that curse will be inherited by Lily. One way or another, he must end this curse in his generation. Later in the evening, the Devonshire family arrived for the end-of-war event. Looking around, Rebecca thought that the man had not yet arrived, but suddenly, a loud fanfare sounded and it was announced that His Grace Duke Julian Johannes had arrived. Yes, the one Rebecca had been waiting for all this tedious evening had finally appeared. From the doorway, the war hero was greeted by a voice telling the Duke that he had worked hard in this war. Julian looked back and thanked His Grace the Emperor. And then the old man introduced the man to a girl he saw for the first time, Princess Catherine. What an old fox, the Duke thought with pity. He saw right through it all. The power of the church had been uncontrollably strong for many years. Most of the high-ranking aristocrats were on the side of the church, and it became common for them to revise the policies adopted by the National Assembly. The current emperor, unlike his predecessor, sought to strengthen imperial power, and he clearly saw the intention of using the Johannes family. Julian Johannes was known as a Casanova, changing girls like gloves and having disgusting taste. The emperor asked how about having the first dance with the beautiful princess. But even so, why does he want to marry his daughter to him, knowing about such rumors in society? Unfortunately, until there is no other choice, he must play the role of the emperor's obedient dog. Nothing can be done. And he asked if she, the princess, would do him the honor of dancing the first dance with her. If he marries a princess, even the temple cannot frivolously demand that he take a concubine. But he could not drag an innocent lady into this matter and let her repeat her mother's fate. While the Duke was giving his first dance to the princess at the banquet, Rebecca was watching him. Suddenly, her husband returned her gaze to himself, and he told Rebecca that she should only look at him. Rebecca gasped and apologized. She told Geoffrey that she felt a little dizzy, but he told her to behave well in places like that. After all, she needs to show everyone that she only looks at him. Yes, she answered, thinking, disgusting. And after the dance, he sent her to the farthest corner and ordered her to sit there quietly. But thanks to the fact that he went to have fun with others, Rebecca had a chance. The Duke also finished the dance and went off to a place where there were the fewest people and exhaled heavily. To his surprise, a voice said that there were no cats to be seen today. Julian tensed up. He didn't think there would be a woman here who would approach him. He was planning to leave, but then she asked if this cat, Leo, shared the same soul with him. And the rest of the cats are just bait to hide this. Having heard this once known to others, the Duke exclaimed like her. The stranger immediately interrupted him. "Enough," she said. "Don't pretend to talk to her. They are being watched." And indeed, looking around, Julian quickly came across the man who was watching intently. And returning to the column and the conversation, the Duke asked who she was. Rebecca replied that she would tell him straight out. She knew everything perfectly well. And she told Julian the words that pierced his bones. She knew a way to remove the curse from the Duke. What nonsense, he asked. If the cat linked to his soul died, he would die too, and that he was collecting stories about the curse to find a way to break it, she continued. The Duke replied that he was hearing about this for the first time, actually wondering who had sent her, the Emperor or the tricks of Duke Ranus. Then how about this? She also knows the fact that the Duke, now famous for his perverted passion, is actually a virgin. He hides it with rumors, but in reality he would not sleep promiscuously with just anyone after all. He did not want to leave offspring as his father had ordered. She knew that too, but since she wanted it so much, he wouldn't miss the chance to get rid of the curse now, Rebecca asked. Julian asked what she wanted, and the girl explained what she would tell him if he danced with her. He must definitely invite her to dance in front of the Emperor when all eyes are turned here. Julian anxiously asked her to wait and tell him her name, but the answer did not take long to come. Rebecca, immediately after his words, the name of this girl sounded from the lips of the man. And looking back at the end, Rebecca smiled and whispered that she would wait for him. Geoffrey then approached the girl and asked how long she had been waiting, explaining that Duke Ranus had not let him go. Suddenly the Count noticed a piercing gaze on the couple, and then he reproachfully remarked how rude it was for him to look at someone else's wife with such a glance. The Count, sighing, turned into a duke. He didn't even notice him, because he was so inconspicuous. Damn Julian Johannes, that impudent scoundrel. At their first meeting, he made a point of telling him the same thing, leading the freak to leave. This arrogant manner of his, as if he was the best, he never liked it, which is why he tried to avoid meeting him. But he clearly had a keen eye for works of art. He thought that he would never get Rebecca, and ostentatiously said that he would take his wife. Rebecca is his finest work of art. And he won't allow someone like him to covet her. At that very moment, the audience turned their attention to the stage. Everyone noticed how tender the Count was towards his wife. But so what? She lived like a statue locked in her house. But this is quite expected, because his wife is the first beauty of the empire. He would also lock her at home and not show her to anyone. Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots walking on the floor of the hall was heard, attracting everyone's attention. And the Count also looked back, hearing powerful steps approaching him. Geoffrey then asked if the Duke had anything else to say. No, he answered proudly, confidently raising his head. He had nothing to say to the Count. He wanted to reach out to her. Julian acted immediately. And just as Rebecca had wanted, with all eyes on them, he asked her if she would like to dance one dance with him. The ladies in the hall were in complete shock at the Duke's outburst, knowing the Count's character very well. Rebecca had hardly met this man before her return, so she was surprised. Even after her sudden offer of a deal, he had such a calm expression on his face. He was definitely a difficult man, but then Geoffrey advised Rebecca to refuse, saying that he was not worth getting involved with. But then the Emperor attracted everyone's attention with his laughter. "The Earl of Devonshire," he exclaimed laughingly, and told the boy that it was not right to be so protective of his wife. The Count exclaimed that the man was rude, but the Emperor saw no rudeness and asked if he had not already danced the first dance with her. As far as he heard, his wife had never danced with another man. It was possible once. He allowed it. Just think, the Grand Duke Johannes himself has his eye on someone else's wife. If he uses this correctly, it could become his weakness. And then the aristocrats started talking about how his wife always remained alone after the dance and avoided talking to others. Before marriage, she was not like this, so how much must the Count control her? Sweat, under the pressure of all this conversation behind Geoffrey's back, reluctantly allowed only one dance. Well, the Grand Duke quipped, he asked permission not from the Count but from this lady. In order to appear like a decent wife, Rebecca looked at her husband for permission. Irritated, he nodded. Then, a true gentleman said that it was an honor for him to dance with her lady. During the dance, he asked to tell him now in more detail what this deal was. To the Duke's surprise, Rebecca announced that she was planning to get a divorce and therefore asked him to marry her. "What is she saying?" he asked, and Rebecca replied that soon the temple would start pressuring him to find a bride. Julian asked where she heard that, but the source of the information won't help their contract in any way now, and she didn't ask him to fall in love with her. After all, Rebecca simply wanted to become husband and wife only on paper. Julian liked this promising collaboration and asked if this was all she wanted, and she only needed one thing. To see such beauty right in front of oneself was an incredible ecstasy for any man. Rebecca only needed him to give her the power to crush the line of the Earl of Devonshire, and then she will save him. The Duke wondered how he could believe her words, but he would have to believe them, if he wants to save his little sister from the curse. This girl knew about Lily too, but those eyes, it didn't look like she was lying. Who is this woman? Rebecca did not ask for an answer right now, but when he accepted it, she asked that Leo be sent to the Count's house. Her room was on the second floor of the east wing. She would put a yellow flower on the windowsill and wait for his answer. But as soon as Rebecca finished speaking with the man, the Duke immediately grabbed his wife, and he rudely led her away, enraged by Rebecca's flirting with another man. And so the Duke, stunned by the couple rushing away, was left alone. Almost throwing her into the carriage, Geoffrey ordered her to return home immediately. She understood him. "I understand," he asked angrily, switching to obscenities, that she understood that she liked being nice to another man. Slamming the door, he ordered her to sit quietly at home. She would have to pay for what she had done today, and sent the coachman ahead. The Count watched the departing carriage when he suddenly heard heavy approaching footsteps. He immediately told the Duke that one should not covet what belongs to others. But Julian said she was not a thing, and asked how she could be his property. "Look at this," said Geoffrey, no longer holding back his disgust. "He even dares to be insolent." "What?" the Duke asked. "Does he want him to talk to him like an old man, huh? It seems age is the only thing he can boast of." Well, if that's what he wants, then that's what he'll do, calling him dear Uncle Count. What a bastard, the Count muttered. Suddenly, the sacred animals of the goddess appeared, meowing menacingly at Geoffrey. Be quiet, children, the Duke told them. He's a bad man, but if they make a scene here, they'll only hurt themselves. Devonshire was stunned by such thunderclaps from Johannes and recoiled in alarm. As he ran away, he shouted that he shouldn't even think about approaching Rebecca again. This woman was his wife and his property, subsequently sneezing, cursing at the damned cat hair. Suddenly, his lordship was noticed by an assistant, and he ran up anxiously, asking why he was there. Johannes turned to Claude, and he said, "It seems that he will soon be getting married, that's how," answered Claude, not yet attaching any significance to the words. But the very next moment he exclaimed in horror, "What?" "Only while she is married," the Duke happily explained to his assistant. The Count's carriage arrived at the mansion. By that time it was raining heavily, and Rebecca was sitting quietly in the room. Alice watched her mistress with such unease that she did not utter a word upon her arrival. Rebecca asked Alice that she was not as talkative as usual today. Didn't she wonder why she returned from the ball so early? The maid hesitated and asked why she had returned so suddenly. Perhaps something had happened. She told me that today Duke Johannes invited her to dance, and she danced with him. The Emperor himself ordered it. And Alice asked how it was. Was she excited? She heard that the Duke was a wonderful man. She would like to see it with her own eyes, after which Rebecca trembled and pursed her lips. Seeing tears in her eyes, Alice asked Madame anxiously. But then Geoffrey's cry was heard, calling Rebecca and interrupting their conversation. "Finally he has come, we need to get ready." Irritably, he opened the door and called Rebecca, but then saw his wife on her knees. And having calmed down, he said that it seemed she understood perfectly well that she had done wrong. But that doesn't mean he'll ignore it, especially after the humiliation he experienced today. And as soon as he grabbed the whip, Rebecca begged Geoffrey not to do it. But suddenly she froze, stopping, begging him to stop, as if she had seen something she had not noticed before. "The servants must always answer for the mistress's misdeeds," he exclaimed, beating Alice. Suddenly Rebecca screamed. She was wrong and promised that she would never look at another man again. She admitted that she had done something very wrong, so she begged him to stop. "It would have been like that a long time ago," the Count said with a smile. She was so beautiful that all sorts of creatures were constantly clinging to her, and he began to brazenly lie to her again. From now on, if someone like that gets attached to her, she must resolutely refuse. His beautiful wife. Rebecca restrained herself and only nodded in response. Today Rebecca was very dirty, so he would have to go to Alicia's room. He ordered the servants to patch up the maid and wash Rebecca. As soon as the door slammed behind Geoffrey, Rebecca was finally able to raise her head. Then she went up to Alice and asked if it hurt a lot. "Not at all," the girl answered. "Everything is fine. As long as Madame is fine, such things are nothing to her." Rebecca hugged Alice like a mother, comforting the poor child. And, finding her in a vulnerable position, she finally asked the cow why she was smiling then. "When the Count took the whip," Rebecca explained, repeating in her memory the fragment she had seen. Rebecca repeated what she asked, why she smiled and ordered to answer. She began to suspect Alice from the moment Geoffrey rushed into the office, first thing and without hesitation. So why did the man, who is never in a hurry, run here so quickly? The only thing that could make him do this was her actions. And the only one the cat knew about this was Alice, and if you think about it, it's strange that she still never suspected her. If she became even slightly attached to the maids, Geoffrey would immediately fire them or send them elsewhere. So as not to leave a single person on her side, but with Alice it was different. She was a servant who had been with her from the first day of her arrival. If she had thought about it more, she would have realized right away that this was only possible because she was Geoffrey's person. Her judgment had been clouded by the fact that she had sacrificed her life for her, but now she doubted even the purpose of that sacrifice. Rebecca ordered Alice to get away, and the maid anxiously asked Madame what this meant. She has already lost her trust, so she knows perfectly well what Geoffrey will do to her, but she will give her one last chance. She told the maid that tomorrow morning she would tell Geoffrey to fire her. So she advised Alice to run away from here before dawn. She realized that a naive and stupid woman had revealed it to her. Didn't she even have the courage to take revenge on the traitor? She didn't like it, and she wondered if she would even ask why. But for Rebecca, knowing the reason wouldn't change anything. She just told her to hurry up and run. The maid told Rebecca that she had always been like this, she had everything, but she did not know how to enjoy it. Does she really think that anyone is born to poor parents of their own free will? Wasn't her family also insignificant? Since the Count had sheltered her out of the kindness of his heart, shouldn't she be grateful? She asked Alice if she was saying this because she had seen what had been done to her. Did they do it? She asked, and at the same time she was still dissatisfied with something, but he considers her beautiful. She said with envy that he gave her so many jewels and even dressed her beautifully. Did she know how many times she had caught herself wishing she could take her place? Alice asked, and she screamed in rage. Why couldn't she just stop resisting him and live in peace? Rebecca told Alice to watch her words, threatening that she could kill her right then and there. Try to kill me, she screamed, but she won't be able to, because she has always been a naive and kind countess. Enough of this hypocrisy, exclaimed the envious maid, when suddenly, the maid who came with the Count cold-bloodedly hit Alice on the head with a basin, stunning her. Not expecting such a turn of events, Rebecca looked with concern at the fallen body of the servant, and the maid turned coldly to Lady Rebecca and informed her that the bath was ready. Having grabbed Alice, who was lying unconscious, the servant said that she would deal with this scum. As soon as the door slammed behind them, Rebecca fell to her knees. She had given her many chances, but now it was all over for her. And that maid was probably Jeffrey's person. What will happen to Alice now? Ha! There was a nervous laugh, and there she was again, still worried about Alice. Tears of resentment rolled down her face from the realization that she was now completely alone. She no longer has any allies here. How long did she sit like that? The maid who said that the bath was ready never returned until the end of the night. Wiping away her tears, Rebecca finally walked to the window and looked at the full moon illuminating everything. Looking at the endless sky and standing next to the yellow flowers, Rebecca clenched her fists. She told herself that she would definitely become strong, and that she would definitely become strong and break the rock. She has nothing left to lose, now she can do anything. The heavy rain continued to pound the ground, and Alice's hand touched the wet stone. Finally arriving at the Count's gallery, the maid threw Alice aside like a bag of trash. The girl finally came to her senses, and clutching her aching head, asked what she was doing. She anxiously asked where Lady Rebecca was, sighing and saying that she was in the way. Suddenly, looking around, Alice froze in horror, realizing where she was. It was a scary place, and she immediately began to beg the girl not to take her to the basement. Worried about her life, Alice asked what she wanted, promising to give everything so that. But then Jeffrey came up and said, "He continues to make noise until the very end. Calm her down." With a precise movement, the girl struck Alice in the neck, stunning her and causing her to fall unconscious. "Her name is Canna," the Count asked with interest. She was more useful than he thought. If she continued to work well, she would get everything she wanted. However, she did understand what would happen if she crossed the line. "Yes," Canna answered. "This time Octavian found a good dog, good. From tomorrow she will become Rebecca's servant instead of Alice. She will have to report to him about everything, about Rebecca's thoughts, things, looks, about everything." Kanan understood him. And then the Count ordered her to be led. The assistant who came with him lifted Alice up. And together with Jeffrey they left this terrible room, Kana watching them go. But now in her gaze there was not devotion, but contempt and disgust directed at the Count. The next morning, when Rebecca woke up, she was greeted by an unusual but familiar voice. The maid introduced herself as Kana and said that from today on she would be serving her, madam. This was the maid she had seen yesterday. It was amazing how quickly he had found a replacement for Alice. But among the maids she had glimpsed in her past life, there was no girl named Kana. Had the future really changed, Rebecca wondered worriedly. Kana had incredibly flawless skill, while Alice was clumsy in many ways. I wonder what happened to her in the end. Did Kana tell Jeffrey that she figured out who Alice was? She thought it would be a problem when Kana told her that Alice was dead. The Count doesn't know the details of what happened last night, so the Count still... Lady Rebecca. "What kind of antics is this?" she asked angrily. It was Jeffrey who ordered her to win her favor. It's useless. She saw how it all ended for Alice, so she should understand. "Run," she advised, "before it's too late, if she values her life." Kana paused to think about how to answer her madam correctly, and, unexpectedly, she knelt before the mistress. Taking a folded handkerchief out of her pocket, Kana said that this was a thing that she valued more than her own life. She handed the patterned handkerchief to the Countess, and Rebecca, not believing her eyes, asked if this was really it. "Yes, that's right," Canna answered reverently. "This is proof that she, Lady Rebecca, saved her life." It was a warm spring day that day, but for her at that moment it was colder than ever. The man ordered her to follow him quietly. Her father was going to sell her to a brothel to pay off gambling debts, thin but beautiful, like her late mother. They offered a small price for her, but the surroundings immediately frightened the little girl. The moment she entered there, she felt that if she stayed here, she would never be able to escape again. And so, disobeying her father, she broke free and ran away, wherever her eyes looked, no matter where, as far as possible from here. The man chased after her, but Canna covered a great distance and ran out into the people. Mikam felt a sense of peace in her soul, knowing that she could blend into the crowd. But suddenly a carriage almost ran into her, and the coachman managed to lead the horses to the side. And the little girl, falling on her hand, began to tremble with fear and pain. But suddenly an incredibly beautiful girl came out of the carriage that she had cut off and asked if she was okay. All thoughts immediately dissolved, and the pain seemed to disappear at the sight of this angel. But we shouldn't forget about the father, who ran into the crowd and shouted, calling for Canna. The girl immediately began to tremble with fear that she might be found, and Rebecca realized that something had to be done about this. She carefully picked up the baby in her arms and carried her in the carriage, but Canna asked her not to do this, worrying about her dress. "Don't worry," the girl told her, smiling, "it's just a dress." And while carrying the found girl into the carriage, she asked the coachman to go to the Liberty Shelter. On the way, she asked the girl if she knew the one who had just screamed. Canna cowered in fear, not even knowing how to answer the question posed. And then Rebecca saw that there was blood on her hand. Touched by the child, Rebecca admitted that she did it as a gift for someone else, but now, she thought, he was much more important to her, and she asked him not to take it off until they arrived. From such care, tears flowed by themselves. The place where they were heading was called Liberty Shelter. Rebecca said that all the people there were good, and she would make sure that whoever yelled at her did not come near her again. It was the first time in Canna's life that she felt such a warm touch. Although she could not meet Lady Rebecca after she was taken to the orphanage, she never forgot her warm touch. No, she simply would not dare to forget. She had survived until now, driven by a single desire. She met Lady Rebecca again, and she never forgot for a moment what she had done for her. And she finally managed to meet her, no matter even if she forgot her. She would still do anything to make her happy, and Rebecca remembered. Then, on that day, the woman in love came to Jeffrey to give him a patch that she had made herself. But he only responded ungratefully, and asked what kind of worthless trash it was. While he simply threw it away, she, the girl whose hand she had then tied with a handkerchief, kept it. Canna assured her that she would not ask her to trust her right now, but asked her to use her as she wished. If she tells her to kill Jeffrey, she will kill him. If she tells her to break the concubine's legs, she will do it. She wanted to be on her side, but after what she had been through, it was difficult to decide whether she was telling the truth. Will she really be on her side, or will she betray her like everyone else? She stood up abruptly and said that she was now Jeffrey's man, and Canna did not deny that she came on the Count's orders, but it was in order to be near her, Lady Rebecca. She would rather die than become this bastard's man. No, Rebecca explained, she had to become Jeffrey's man. If she wants to help her, she must gain Jeffrey's trust and become her eyes and ears, and if necessary, her legs. But first, she must prove that she is on her side and bring her a lock of Jeffrey's hair. And it would be better if she cut it off anyhow. Canna would do it. She could rely on her. "Okay, Canna," Rebecca replied, asking not to betray her. Suddenly there was a knock and a creaking sound on the glass. Both girls turned around and discovered a cat. Realizing that she had finally received an answer from the Duke, Rebecca told Canna that she could go. Letting the cat into the room, Rebecca asked how long he had been waiting, realizing that he was Leo. The cat stretched, and the Countess noticed a mini chest on his neck, in which she found a bundle. Rebecca unfolded it and read the note, in which Julian suggested that they first meet and talk. It was simply wonderful news that my mood was lifted instantly. Rebecca sent a reply asking him to come to the Liberty Shelter that Wednesday at 3 o'clock, secretly and in as shabby clothes as possible. She told him to come himself. "What an interesting woman," Julian said after reading. He stood up and praised Leo for his work, but then the cat started acting up. And then the Duke asked him if he was offended, because he was only glad to send him on an errand. Leo, there was nothing he could do. He couldn't entrust such an important task to another cat. Noda is a woman. She looks like that child, Leo said, trembling. Julian asked, "Are you talking about that child?" In her only memory, she asked if he was okay. This couldn't be. It was a dense forest. He saw that woman. She looked like she had never left the capital in her life. Leo just said what he felt in any case. She didn't seem bad. Then that's good. He asked if he didn't mind then. If what she said was true, then the curse could be lifted. Then it is him. Leo replied that he didn't mind. After all, he had been abandoned a long time ago. He always said that. Leo interrupted and said, "If he's finished, then he'll go. He's hungry." And what was the point of them being able to share feelings and thoughts if he still couldn't understand what was going on in his head? Rebecca, it was the same with this woman. He didn't understand what she was thinking and couldn't guess her next move. However, although her proposal was absurd, it was quite interesting. Judging by the fact that letters are constantly coming from the temple, they will soon begin to rush him with an heir. For the temple, the fact that Rebecca is divorced will not be a big problem, because Daphne's religion is not conservative in matters of marriage. But still, it is rare that someone openly takes a second wife, like the Count. Even though they have not had children for 10 years, Rebecca is still young. And to take a concubine, and such a young one at that, is an open disregard for his first wife. This bastard deserves a divorce. Especially considering what Leo said about last night, the very idea of punishing your wife is absurd. And the punishment also consisted of flogging her dear man right in front of her eyes. She must have been through worse things. When he picked her up, she was incredibly light, as if she was being starved. If she becomes a duchess, the first thing he must do is feed her well. The next morning, the Count woke up with the sunrise and went to the sink to wash his face. And having finished with the water procedures, I moved to the mirror to admire myself as usual. However, this time it did not happen, and an angry, loud scream of horror was heard. At the cry of their master, the guards immediately came running, anxiously asking the Count what had happened. His hair, trembling with anger, he said, and shouting, he repeated, "His hair." Seeing such a ridiculous work of art, the guards found it very difficult to contain their laughter. "Who," shouting, asked Geoffrey, "what bastard did this?" He ordered to bring everyone who stood guard yesterday. Having woken up because of her husband's screams, the Countess discovered a box on the bedside table with her husband's hair inside. "Well, my mood has improved this morning," as she said. She will do anything. She was not lying. As soon as Rebecca put the box away, Canna entered the room. The servant asked if she was awake. Rebecca immediately said that she had done a good job. "No, what are you saying?" Canna answered. She simply completed the building. Rebecca thought she had sufficiently proven her qualifications. And she said that she had to go out today and asked if she could get her ready for the exit. The girl asked Madam what clothes to prepare, and Rebecca requested the most shabby ones. During breakfast with his wives, Geoffrey sighed loudly and discontentedly as he chewed his food. Suddenly, having finished her portion, Alicia asked the servant to bring another plate. "Enough eating," Geoffrey snapped, pointing out to his wife that he had gained weight lately. Alicia said that pregnant women should eat well. She probably doesn't know because she's a commoner, but aristocrats don't eat like that indiscriminately, even when they're pregnant, and he warned her that he'd kick her out if she got fat. He told her to look at Rebecca, how elegant she was, and told her to learn from her. How many times did he have to tell him? That's why they are commoners. "No, Geoffrey," his first beloved doll of a wife interrupted him. She said that Alicia was carrying his first child, and asked if maybe he would let her eat a little more. Rebecca admitted that she already felt guilty that they didn't have children, and that's why she wanted at least Alicia's child to grow up healthy and strong. Geoffrey listened to his wife's sweet and truthful words and asked for another half plate. Alicia was annoyed by this. Why, she thought angrily, were they both his wives and he only listened to Lady Rebecca? And, throwing away the knife, she angrily said that she would not eat. "Alicia," he exclaimed, not tolerating such childish antics. Suddenly, Rebecca gently asked her husband not to get so excited. They say that pregnant women become very sensitive. And besides, since this had happened to his hair, maybe he should get a shorter haircut, she suggested. She sheepishly admitted that she had long thought that a short haircut would suit him. She thought he would look more masculine with her. Well, since she says so, he was embarrassed. Perhaps a short haircut really does suit him. Everything worked out. Let's go for it. Pressing her breasts against him, Rebecca told Jeffrey that she wanted to go out for a little while today and asked if he minded. Even the words about going out frightened him, immediately setting him up for the idea that the doll might get lost. And looking warily at his wife, he asked where. The girl explained that she had been going to the shelter regularly, but had been neglecting it a bit lately. Now he understood why she had put on such plain clothes. Yes, she replied. Whether he liked it or not, she didn't want to dress up there anyway. True, Jeffrey agreed with her. It was better to look like a beggar than to attract the attention of all sorts of idiots. He allowed her to go, and Rebecca thanked Jeffrey. Alicia was already burning up. She knew it. As soon as she did something she had never done before, it turned out that she needed something. What a hypocritical bitch, Alicia thought, seething with anger. Julian reminded the vassal that he wanted to dress modestly. A simple robe without frills would be enough. The Duke has a reputation to uphold, Claude said. And anyway, since when did he start listening to other people's words? He listened so easily to the words of some woman. The Duke asked him to be careful with his expressions. She would become a duchess. But then Johannes thought about it and said, and yet it would be better to at least tidy up his hair. He then walked lightly towards the mirror, ignoring Claude. Then the assistant asked in despair if she really possessed unearthly beauty. And he asked if he started listening to her because he lost his head over her beauty or what. What? You asked the Duke if he was jealous now, and apologized to Claude for the fact that he was already taken, and, besides, their age difference was too big. What nonsense is he talking about? Claude shouted. He is just a loyal vassal who worries about the naive Duke day and night. This woman is not that simple. She definitely has ulterior motives. Well, the conditions aren't that bad, and what difference does it make whether it's spreading rumors about a marriage or an actual contract marriage? None of these options inspired confidence. He asked Claude. He knows that he is ready to do anything to get rid of this curse. But what if that lady was lying, he worried. Even if so, well, he'll still believe her, and no, he's not saying he trusts Rebecca completely. Still, she could help him achieve his goal, to be honest. He was already a little tired. And he did not know what he was so worried about and asked if he had forgotten that he was Duke Johannes. And while he was with her, he would not sit idly by. He believed that during this time he would find a way to remove the curse. Ever since he first saw him, the Duke had not looked like a child. He had not even shed a tear at his mother's funeral. But to him, it looked like a fragile shard of glass, ready to shatter at any moment. Now he, Claude Chenister, was his only ally, and that day Claude decided to protect him. He wanted to break the curse on his generation. He wanted to protect that boy who had lost his family and couldn't even afford to cry. And yet, what he was never able to find, some stranger woman, whom he sees for the first time, knows. How could he believe it? Claude insisted on going along, wanting to be his cool brain because he was worried about Lady Rebecca's safety. Since this was the case, he had to find out what was on this woman's mind, so they arrived at Liberty's shelter. Rebecca was the first to show up and ask her old acquaintances how they were all doing. The girl greeted Lady Rebecca joyfully and replied that they were getting on well. She whispered to Lady Rebecca that the guest had already arrived and was waiting for her. Not understanding why the orphanage teacher was speaking in a whisper, Rebecca looked around. Jeffrey had indeed sent his hound, Robert I think his name was, and he had been following her for several months. Silently, Rebecca, as if with a glance, gave Canna the task, and she quickly caught it on the fly. She walked up to Robert and started a casual conversation, easily drawing him away. He followed her so easily, Rebecca wondered in surprise. What was he thinking about as he left his post? The girl led her to her waiting guest, and Rebecca apologized for keeping him waiting for so long. However, when she raised her head, she was stunned to see a familiar figure next to Julian. Claude, Liberty's shelter was the only place she could relax before she returned. Perhaps that is why, in her past life, after escaping, she found refuge in the very place where she eventually met Claude. Because he looked more like a poor man, she did not believe his words that he was Johannes's butler. But only she noticed that he was talking about things that only a close associate of the Duke could know. At that time, Julian was bedridden due to a curse, and Claude, having gone in search of a way to remove the curse, ended up going crazy. Having gone mad, he sometimes told her the secrets of the ducal family, but there was something strange in them. Every time he mentioned a way to break the curse, he coughed up blood. Suffering from fever, before he breathed his last, he told her. The man told that he had found out a way to save the Duke. And these words fell as a great burden on the already poor girl with a child. At that time, Rebecca could not tell the Duke about this because she was avoiding Jeffrey. Still, it was wrong to use those words in this life, but it was her only way to survive. She apologized mentally. Suddenly, Julian, noticing the tension between the two, asked if they knew each other. Did Claude really tell Rebecca the secrets of the ducal family? No, the man swore that he saw her for the first time. It's a misunderstanding, the Countess explains. She just thought that whoever was helping the Duke must be a wonderful person. The Duke sensed a certain falseness in her words and asked Claude to leave for a moment. And as soon as they were alone, facing each other, Rebecca suggested getting down to business. And when it came to discussing everything regarding their marriage contract, Julian liked her approach. She drew up 4 main points in the contract, and after reading them, the Duke said he had a question. She asked him to ask. He asked whether the divorce was not enough, why the tedious overthrow of the Earl's family, and why Jeffrey had to be killed. Let's just say, she answered nervously, there was a personal grudge involved, and she promised to tell him everything when the time came. Julian thought thoughtfully. It didn't seem like she had any other ulterior motives. But it wouldn't do any harm to the Duke. He could consider it an investment. She would do all the work herself, and he wouldn't have to get his hands dirty. He just needs to provide her with the protection of a duchess and financial support, of course. She didn't ask for it for free. She promised to return double whatever he borrowed, and the Duke wondered if he had really gone mad to somehow believe these absurd words. Well, okay, as she said, he has nothing to lose, but still he would like to fix something in the contract. It was regarding the third point. Without the consent of the other party, this phrase confused him. In the end, they will become spouses if she wants to date someone else. Shouldn't she get his consent? Rebecca added this point for the comfort of Julian himself, who was entering into his first marriage. Did he really care about her? He didn't have to worry about her, but if he was uncomfortable about it, they could change him. Now Julian agreed to the terms, just change this and continue. Although it was a contract marriage, he had no intention of dating other women during this period. He did not want to commit such terrible acts as his father, but the amended contract was ready. After running his eyes over the text, the man said, "Okay, let's do that," and then got up from the sofa. With confident steps, he approached the candle and, holding the sheet over it, burned the contract. "What are you doing?" Rebecca asked, alarmed. The Duke explained that in any case, neither she nor he intended to betray each other. It was better to get rid of such dangerous evidence. He will honor this contract because his life is at stake. She also won't betray him if she values her life. Come on, answer. She won't betray him. His threatening tone frightened Rebecca, and she began to doubt herself and the information. But she soon replied, of course not. She would also honor the contract because her life was at stake too. He asked what she was going to do next. The Earl of Devonshire is a difficult opponent and ranks 3rd in influence in the empire. Rebecca asked if he knew that he was the cornerstone of the Earl of Devonshire's house. Well, he asked. People, she answered. The Count's house has only 4 cornerstones. The first are hired workers who manage the mansion. The second are vassals who are responsible for the main affairs of the Count. The third is the escorts who provide the Count with information, and the last is the knightly order who guard the Count's house. And the key figures who make up these cornerstones are called hounds. They do not act out of loyalty. They are held captive by mortal weaknesses that prevent them from disobeying orders, so they obey the Count's words without question. So, the key is to deal with these hounds, but how is she going to do that? Once tamed, a hound will not easily betray its master, she chuckled, because he had missed something. As she already said, the Count is supported by people. They are not real hounds, but people like them. She will remove the collar that Jeffrey put on and will release the prison called their weakness. Interested in the Countess's idea, the Duke asked how he could help. To begin with, she was going to create a small trading guild. It would be good if there was a capable person to take the role of the guild leader. Julian understood, so for now he just had to sit quietly on the sidelines and give money. Not bad. He had plenty of money, so she could take as much as she wanted. Rebecca thanked the man and asked if she could ask for one more thing. Of course, he replied. And the girl asked if he by any chance knew about devil's claw, a herb that shouldn't be eaten and that causes a rash. But when it became clear that it was used as a dye, its price skyrocketed. So she asked to get fresh devil's claw leaves, but unfortunately this is not possible unless you grow it yourself. But the Duke only needed to provide a greenhouse and a laboratory if there were seeds. She knew a wonderful person who could grow them. She clearly had no intention of making a dress out of it, so what was its true purpose? And Rebecca just wanted to get married as soon as possible. In her past life, the devil's claw was called a panacea. This was because of another of its properties that a botanist discovered. If you eat fresh fox, blisters first appear and the temperature rises, which causes the person to remain ill for a long time. And then it removes all toxins and cures even other chronic diseases. There were even rumors that he could restore the youth that Jeffrey was so obsessed with. Then he, saying that she needed to take good care of her beautiful skin, spent a lot of money, bought leaves and made her eat them. But this time, everything will be different. Jeffrey does not yet know about the properties of the devil's claw. Jeffrey loved her for only one reason, and it was all about her looks. And if she lost the beauty he loved so much, he would no longer have a reason to keep her close. Julian was amazed that she could say such things so calmly. Rebecca asked him not to look at her like that, and asked if not everyone had their thorns in life. Indeed, Julian thought, the more he talked to her, the more he wanted to know her better. Then, having heard everything that was required, the Duke agreed, and now they were partners. And he suggested that Rebecca try her best. She was surprised, but shaking his hand, asked him to take care of her. Having sealed their partnership with a handshake, the partners parted ways, and Rebecca returned to the mansion. Jeffrey met her at the door and said that she had returned later than he expected. And then he asked his wife how she liked it. He got his hair cut as she advised. Was it worth asking, she wondered, and answered, of course it suits him very well. Coming closer, the Count lowered his tone and said that while she was gone, he caught himself thinking that he seemed to neglect her after he brought Alicia, and he wondered if maybe today they would spend time together, just the two of them. Rebecca was shaking with anxiety and fear. Memories of how their acts of love took place immediately came to mind. How cruel Jeffrey was in bed, just trying to have a child. He asked his wife if she understood, and asked her to take off her shabby clothes, dress up, and come to his room. The head maid dressed the Countess in a beautiful, greasy outfit and asked, "Well, isn't it perfect?" "Damn beautiful," Rebecca answered with pain in her voice, looking at herself. "What?" the woman asked again. "Nothing." The Countess snapped and went into her husband's bedroom. Standing in front of the stairwell, Rebecca tried to calm her shaking hands, telling herself everything was okay. She did this countless times, but the trembling did not subside until Alicia asked if she was going to the Count's room, and with some regret she said, "She really is beautiful." Suddenly, Rebecca remembered that something similar had happened before, which meant she could use this method. "True," the first wife asked politely, and thanked the second for thinking so. "But she knows that this is only temporary." She asked him not to forget that she is much younger than the lady, and soon all the Count's attention will be hers. Now, she thought uncertainly. Yes, she agreed. She could take this attention for herself without reserve, and proudly asked if she knew. Even so, she will never become the first wife, and if today she can conceive a child, her child, like her, will forever remain the second. These words were the most painful and vulnerable point in Alicia's greed. Clenching her fists in anger, she said that she would regret her words and screamed. A cry begging Lady Rebecca not to do this attracted the maids. Alicia smirked and took a step back. She deliberately stumbled and flew down the stairs. But this was just what Rebecca was waiting for, excitement burning inside her from the realization that Alicia had done the same as in the past. To the horror of the second wife, the Countess jumped after her and heroically caught her. She made sure that Alicia was not harmed and that the entire blow fell on her. Rebecca injured her entire body, a bloody shoe fell off her foot, and she carefully said that she needed to be more careful. "A little secret in her belly, that's her only asset," she said sarcastically. Alicia was horrified when suddenly she heard the sound of stomping. The sound of women's heels could be clearly heard from the floor, and then the maids ran up to Madame. They ran worriedly to the most wounded of the girls, Rebecca groaning in pain. The Count came down from his room to the shouts and noise, asking what the noise was and what had happened. Well, the moment he saw Rebecca in such a state, his face changed to concern. He immediately went down to the stairs, running up to her and stepping on Alicia's hand, asked what was wrong with her face. He shouted to the servants that if even one scar remained on Rebecca's face, they could consider themselves dead. The girl was shaking with pain and pitifully addressed Jeffrey, saying that Alicia was not to blame for anything. Therefore, with a trembling voice, she continued to forgive her pleas and then suppressed the nausea. At that moment, Kana suggested to the Count that she take Madame to her room and call a doctor. "Yes," he replied. "Call a doctor immediately." Kanan anxiously picked up the girl in her arms and quickly ran away with her in her arms. Having watched them go and being left alone, she timidly turned to the Count, and he angrily called her by name. He asked, embittered by the situation, not knowing his place, how dare she do such a thing? The girl fearfully and anxiously answered no. It was an accident. But without even listening to her, the Count ordered the servants to take her to the Hall of Light. The next fine morning, Kanan asked Madame if it was really necessary to go so far. "Well," Rebecca answered happily, "compared to what she would get, it was nothing." Although she was injured, thanks to this she was able to avoid meeting with Jeffrey for 2 months. The memories that emerged at that moment helped. In her past life, Alicia had fallen down the stairs in the same way and then slandered her out of jealousy for pushing her. Just think that she did the same in this life. She asked what had happened to Alicia. Kana replied that they had assigned a whole pack of hounds to her. The Count was furious. Thanks to this, only Robert remained here. Great. She asked how the guest she asked to invite was doing. "Yes," Kana answered. "She sent a letter and she said she would arrive today." But didn't Jeffrey object? On the contrary, he said that it was even good and told her to invite her here more often for now. Like, what if she suffered psychological trauma? How unlike him to worry about her mental state. "Rebecca!" the woman cried as she burst into the room. "What the hell happened here? Here comes Mom." She heard Alicia push her. "No," Rebecca explained. "It was an accident. She was trying to save her when she fell." "What should I do?" sighed Mother. She is such a kind girl that she was worried. To make the cat worry, not a single letter had been sent from her, Rebecca noticed. Yes, she knew that her mother had no power, but that didn't mean she wasn't offended. That night, the documents she saw in the office said they had received a huge sum on one condition. That she would marry Jeffrey Devonshire, moreover, the advice that her mother gave her on her wedding day. She asked Rebecca to never have a child with the Count. The moment the child was born, she would be trapped. And even if she does, she shouldn't get too attached to him. Mom already knew everything then. From the moment she first saw Jeffrey, she had a bad feeling. Initially, the earldom of Devonshire and the viscountcy of Obelia were not equal. Such a marriage was bound to be unhappy, so they refused. However, when the investment into which the father had invested his entire fortune failed, they found themselves on the verge of bankruptcy. It was then that Jeffrey, as if foreseeing this situation, came with a huge sum of money. He didn't need a dowry, and he asked if they would be against the marriage this time. This time she couldn't refuse, and Rebecca said that she liked Jeffrey, so she convinced herself that everything was okay. But to think that her selfishness had so ruined her child's life, she had no intention of making excuses. There were reasons for that. She suggested that Rebecca just run away, go somewhere and live in hunger. Isn't that better than such a life? Rebecca looked at her mother sadly and asked if she could really give up everything they had had until now. Maybe she can, but what about her father, her younger brother and sister? Will she be able to force other family members to sacrifice themselves for her alone? "Becky," Mother Rebecca called gently. "Becky?" That's right, that was her nickname in the family. Rebecca couldn't cope with the emotions that came over her in an instant. The woman looked at the servant with alarm and wondered how long she had been there. Rebecca asked her mother not to worry. Kana was her person. Running away won't help. You need to create a solid foundation and then leave on your own 2 feet. She suggested to her mother that they get out of this hateful shadow of the Devonshire family together. But how? The woman asked. Rebecca told her mother that she was going to get a divorce. Get a divorce? The woman asked anxiously. The Countess explained, yes, and she would marry again, but this time to Duke Johannes. What was she saying? Asked Mom. So far, only my mother knew about this, and my father must not find out about this under any circumstances. Every time Rebecca made that face, she got everything after that. She said it in all seriousness. The mother agreed and asked her daughter what she needed to do. And then Rebecca asked her mother if she wanted to go into business. But that night, Rebecca still couldn't sleep peacefully. Madame Kana, who was guarding the peace, asked if she was very stuffy. A little, Rebecca admitted awkwardly. She felt stuffy from being in the room all the time. Then the maid suggested that she take a walk, but Rebecca couldn't walk, and even if she could, Jeffrey would never let her out. So that's the thing. Having said this, Kana came closer and lifted the lady into her arms like a trained knight. Rebecca was confused by the maid's gesture and asked Kana in shock. The girl explained to Rebecca that hounds don't walk around here at this time. She checked the area and there was no one nearby. With the girl in her arms, Kana jumped from the second-floor window of Rebecca's room. And having landed, she asked where she would like to go. Now it will be her feet. Rebecca was embarrassed by such devotion and dedication, telling her to move towards the lilac garden. They were silent the whole way, and now she asked Kana why she didn't ask anything. Kana asked what she was talking about. Rebecca replied, about the conversation she had with her mother today. Because, the servant replied, she completely trusted her, Madame Rebecca. Whatever choice she made, and even if she decided to go to hell. Kana had already vowed to follow her, she explained to Madame Rebecca. The Countess pressed closer to her man, hugging him in gratitude. After walking a little further, Kana suggested that they rest here for a while and sat Madame down on a bench. Suddenly I heard an uncharacteristic rustling of leaves and branches and tensed up, noticing a silhouette. It was definitely one of the hounds. Kana reported to Madame that there was someone here. The man did not hide his identity for long. He took off his hood and came out from behind the bushes. Greeting Madame and wishing her good evening, he looked her over from head to toe. Rebecca immediately recognized the man, Robert Crowley, and asked what he was doing there. "Did he really eavesdrop on you?" The man replied. "It was an accident. The moonlight was so beautiful today that he went out for a walk." "What a faithful servant," she remarked, working until such a late hour, but Robert was simply strolling in the garden. It wasn't work, just a moment's rest, but Rebecca explained to Crowley that she wasn't stupid at all. And she also said that she knew perfectly well that all the servants in the mansion were watching her. She asked him not to make such a face. She had no desire to reproach her after all, he was simply doing the job given to him. Since that was the case, she suggested enjoying the moonlight together. She had long wanted to talk to Crowley. The man said his name was Robert. Why, she asked. Did she not like the last name, but that was not the point. Rebecca gasped and said, "Blood bonds are so cruel. To despise even being called by that name, and yet to become a hound to save them." Robert asked worriedly what she knew, but in fact Rebecca didn't know all that much. For example, the fact that he came from an ancient line of followers of Kadir, and the fact that his family is now in Jeffrey's hands. But she could help him. Robert Crowley, before her return, was killed by Jeffrey due to a misunderstanding that he was not in love with her. On the day of the funeral, Robert's family came and they had owl eyes on their foreheads, meaning that their entire family were followers of Kadir, and that scar on Robert's forehead was probably to hide a tattoo. As a child, she heard from her father the story of the persecution of Kadir's followers. In an empire where the main religion is the goddess Daphne, followers of the faith tried not to show tattoos with owl eyes. Because for some time now, owl eyes have become a symbol of misfortune, and Robert's weak spot is most likely his belonging to this faith. The grinning man asked Madame Rebecca if she would save him. "Where are you looking?" Kana answered sullenly. "Take away your dirty gaze before she gouges out his eyes." Rebecca told Kana that she was fine and didn't seem trustworthy right now. She asked her to better hand her a pen and a piece of paper, and after writing something on it, she handed over the package. "What is this?" the man asked warily. This was what he had been looking for, a clue to where his family was, and if he wanted it, it would help him protect them. "And she wants him to believe it?" Robert asked. He had had enough of such threats from the Count. He told her not to try to clumsily imitate him. But even so, Rebecca insisted that the hound take the hint from her. Taking it, he asked what she would do if he betrayed her, why she gave him the information first. Because she believed Robert, he was a follower of Kadir, she knew that Kadir's followers do not lie or betray. Robert had been warning Madame Rebecca restlessly that she could not trust people so easily, proof that at 15 he had renounced his faith and left his family. But it wasn't just about teaching. She knew that Robert had been secretly helping her all this time. Even if he betrays her, it doesn't matter. She will simply feel that she repaid his kindness with this information. But will he really be able to calmly watch the Earl of Devonshire, who treated him so cruelly, live so happily? She told Robert that she definitely couldn't and therefore suggested that he take revenge. Destroy him and wipe him off the face of the earth. Give him back the pain he made them feel. Robert had been living in a hole for a very long time, where not a single ray of light penetrated, serving the Count. He believed that there was no way to escape from this damned count. But the thought of taking revenge on him inspired hope and that same long-awaited ray of light. At that very moment, Robert dropped to one knee, kissed his mistress's wrist, and swore allegiance to Rebecca. Asked what he needed to do first, Rebecca asked him to find out information about the hounds. He asked to trust him with this, and so Rebecca already had 2 people on the side. The next morning, Robert gave her detailed information about the hounds, but the information itself was not there. Headmaid Grace Dungan, she has been here since the previous Earl's time, and is also not Geoffrey's person, but a member of the Devonshire family. She knows more of the Count's family's secrets than Geoffrey. She has the keys to all the rooms, so she is the first one to be lured away. But Grace is truly devoted to the Earl's family. She's not like the other hounds. Geoffrey has no dirt on her, because she's already lost her entire family. Yet she is loyal to the Devonshires, and to successfully carry out her revenge, she must at all costs win Grace Dungan over to her side. But it will be difficult right away. They will not give up easily. Having remembered everything, Rebecca asked Canna to get rid of the documents. "Yes, Madame Rebecca," answered Canna, and then the Countess asked where Geoffrey was now. Canna replied that the Count had left for the palace early in the morning because of a meeting, which was good, meaning he would return late in the evening. She could already walk and, standing up, told Canna that she needed to go out for a while. That same morning, Grace scolded the workers for not being able to do their jobs properly. She tisked, realizing how hopeless and stupid they were. Suddenly her gaze was caught by Canna passing by, heading towards the male servants' rooms. But remembering how hard-working she was, Grace thought, no, she's not the type to do stupid things, everything is fine. And then she raised her head, looking out the window of the Countess's room. The girl inside either turned away abruptly and left, or was simply staggering near the window. Either way, it looked suspicious, and the headmaid tensed up. And after a while, Robert showed Rebecca the place through which she could exit and gave her what she asked for. Rebecca thanked him and said that he had gotten some good stuff. He was uneasy about this outfit, and Rebecca asked him how it looked, whether it suited her, saying that it was much more comfortable than a dress. He warned that she should return as soon as possible. The Count had gone to the capital and would return late, but who knows what might happen. She understood him and asked him to protect Canna. Although in general, he said, she lay in bed all the time so no one would suspect. Then he would be here at the promised time, but things might not go according to plan. She must try not to show herself to the hounds and Grace. "Yes, thank you," Rebecca replied, finally leaving the estate through the hole in the wall. Rebecca took a deep breath. She hadn't felt such freedom in a long time. She had thought she would never get out of Devonshire Manor again, and now that she was out, it seemed so small. Having stopped the cart, the man informed the young lady that they had arrived. She thanked him and asked the man what his name was. His name was Adolf. He was a coffee bean merchant in the city center. If she came in, he would treat her to a cup of coffee. Rebecca thanked him and said goodbye to her dear uncle. Arriving at the place, she was greeted by not the most welcoming signs and very dire warnings. Eustace McQueen, a botanist who will eventually discover the properties of the Devil's Claw, and an eccentric who constantly sits in his laboratory. Geoffrey tried to win him over to his side using low tricks, but he had no weak points, so he failed. Taking a deep breath, the Countess called loudly for Mr. McQueen, but was met with silence. But she did not give up and continued to knock on the scientist's door, banging on it and calling him loudly. And finally, the man emerged from his laboratory, shouting angrily, asking if she had seen the sign, and ordered her not to disturb him and to get out. An unpleasant smell of tobacco came out of the open door of the house. Leaning against the doorway, he raised an eyebrow, waiting to see what the visitor would say to him this time. The girl greeted Mr. Eustace enthusiastically and said that she had come to him with a proposal. "The proposal?" he asked. "Is she another person sent by this Count?" He said that he does not intend to play aristocratic games for money. Now they are buttering him up, saying that he will be able to conduct any research, but in the end they will constantly bother him. That's obvious. Telling her to get out, he slammed the door, and then Rebecca asked if the gift she had brought him would then not be needed. Fresh from the oven, fresh spring potatoes grown in Montpellier, she especially singled out. Hearing her favorite phrase, Eustace, like a faithful dog, asked what she was doing there and why she wasn't coming in, and ran over for a treat. How did he manage to find good potatoes? Today's potatoes are so heavily modified that they lose their original taste. Looking around, she realized that she had arrived on time. There were books related to the devil's claw on the table. After finishing his potatoes, Yustaf asked her what her proposal was. He seemed very interested in the devil's claw. The scientist was surprised that she knew just by looking at the books and asked if she was interested in plants. Rebecca couldn't say that not at all, by the way. It's a pity that such precious plants are abandoned like this. She saw the spotted leaves here and asked if the temperature was not right. Yustaf asked. Now he changed tactics. He sent a specialist to reproach him, but unfortunately, she had no relation to the count he was talking about. Then who is this high-ranking gentleman? Perhaps, she answered, he is very high-ranking, and perhaps not. What did she mean? Rebecca replied. In any case, it didn't matter to him. He was probably more interested in what she could give him, but no one could give him what he wanted. Then the girl told him about her plans, to start with building him a huge greenhouse, but almost everyone had suggested that. But then she explained that she would build it in Montpellier and asked whether it would still be the same as the others. And noticing his interest, she asked, well, is he ready to talk now? Montpellier had noble soil and was a paradise for botanists, but the land was incredibly expensive. She didn't care what kind of research he would conduct. Yustaf asked if she was really ready to do this. What were the conditions? Rebecca cleared her throat dry, and asked if he could offer her some tea first. Yustaf immediately came to his senses, realizing that he had been impolite to the guest and asked her to wait a minute. As the man ran away, Rebecca's gaze was caught by an open book nearby. When he put the dried devil's claw into the dirty water, he saw the boiling water become clear. So he had already discovered the properties of the devil's claw back then, but it seems he never solved the problem. He prepared some cold herbal tea for himself and his guest and returned. Wetting her throat, Rebecca, unexpectedly for the botanist, asked, because he needed a test subject. How is she? McQueen asked worriedly. She confessed while he was gone. She read his notes and apologized for being rude. They were open, so she just took a look. This theory is interesting, a theory that will interest her employer. He asks about the conditions. They are simple. He can conduct research under the direction of her employer. She will provide him with a test subject and devil's claw seeds. But Yustaf didn't want to. Rebecca asked why, but if he succeeds in his research, then all the laurels will go to that high-ranking gentleman, he replied. He had seen countless colleagues who were abandoned like that. But he didn't have to worry about that. Her employer was already famous, so he wasn't interested in such petty fame. Petty glory, he was indignant. The publication of this will cause a huge resonance. Resonance, she asked. This is almost a panacea. It was amazing how he had discovered something like this. She recognized the true value of his theory. Until now, in scientific circles, he was called only crazy and psychotic, but she said that she would get a test subject. Her employer, by any chance, was not from the shadow world. He wanted to rise to the top, so illegal business was out of the question. Rebecca handed him the pendant and asked if it would suit him, and after examining it, Yustaf realized that it was the coat of arms of the Duke's Johannes family. And then, putting up with all the conditions, he asked where he could sign. The dimensions turned out to be much more impressive than she had heard from rumors. Was Rebecca really marrying Duke Johannes? The daughter's future husband greeted Madame Obelia. He was glad to meet her and introduced himself as Julian Johannes. He heard the general outline of their situation from Rebecca and asked if she would take over the new business. This was true, but the woman doubted whether she could cope. If it was her, Mom, then Julian believed she could handle it and asked if she hadn't been running Obelia's house all this time. Oh, and since she is Rebecca's mother, that means she is his mother too, so he asked her to speak casually. The woman thanked him. But then he became tense. Earlier he had asked why she should do business. If she had a lot of debts, he could pay them off. But paying off the debts was only a temporary solution. The father could get into debt again and turn to the Count for help. She was going to hand over the position of head of the family to her mother. If it weren't for her, the Obelia house would have gone bankrupt, but finances were needed for this. Before she gets divorced, she must eliminate the factors that will threaten her from Jeffrey, her family, and Liberty Orphanage. He asked if she could tell him more about the business. The letter said so, but he wanted to hear the details from her. The Viscountess could explain that. It was a kind of rental salon. As he knew, all the noble ladies in the empire held their salons in their houses, right? He replied, because it was a place for parties. But this also comes with a considerable burden. You have to constantly decorate the house in accordance with fashion, and the servants could spread rumors to the husband. Because they can't talk about personal matters calmly, they will rent out space for a salon. They will decorate and rent out rooms or gardens according to the tastes of clients, who will be able to set up safe salons at a low price. But won't this prove that they are not able to decorate their home? Aristocrats don't like ready-made things. Will they like it? She will like it, he answered. Where does such confidence come from? Asked the Duke. It's all because she herself would like the same. Not all aristocrats have a lot of money and time. They also plan to create a private salon for special guests. This should be enough. And after this, Madame Obelia began to tell a more detailed plan of action. And Julian was convinced that Rebecca's words were true. She was more than worthy of becoming the head of the family. Having discussed all the details, they were planning to leave, when suddenly the woman stopped the Duke. And now, as a mother, and not a business partner, she asked what exactly he liked about Rebecca. This question came as a surprise to the Duke, and he wondered what he liked about her. He remembered Rebecca's words about if he wanted to save his little sister, her deep, unsolved gaze at that moment. And he answered her mother because she is incredible, she asked again. True, Julian confirmed. Rebecca was the most incredible woman he had ever met. Returning cautiously to the estate, Rebecca asked where Geoffrey was. Robert replied that the Count had not yet returned and asked her not to do such reckless things again. There was nothing to be done. Meeting this man was too important. In any case, he asked her to quickly change her clothes and come back. While putting on her wig, Rebecca asked what the flowers were for. Robert replied that it was insurance just in case, and holding out the tray, asked her to take it. But fortunately, everyone was busy preparing for dinner, and if things continued like this, everything would end well. Suddenly, the head maid Grace called out to Robert, and both accomplices stopped, startled. Looking coldly at the girl next to him, she asked who it was. Rebecca's heart sank with fear that now everything would be revealed and reported to the Count. Robert, calming the anxiety in himself, said, "It was the maid who was just bringing tea to Madame's room." The head maid raised her head again, examining the figure of the girl, whose hands were shaking as she held the tray. "Of course," said Grace, believing Robert's words. "Madame must not be kept waiting." But then she stopped the servant and, since she was already going upstairs, asked her to tell Madame that Lady Fabiana would visit her tomorrow. This unpleasant and vile image immediately popped into her head, how this woman called her ill-mannered. Rebecca's face immediately twisted at the mere mention of this person's name out loud. Fabiana Devonshire, an obedient wife to her husband and a loving, tender mother, and at the same time a terrible mother-in-law who cruelly tormented her. After she married Geoffrey, she was jealous and hated her for taking over her son's attention. Deliberately dropping the cake on the floor, she said, "What a pity," since she baked it herself. And she asked her daughter-in-law why she was frozen, why she wasn't going to at least eat from the floor. She was constantly putting moral pressure on her and tormenting her. But there were no secrets in this mansion, and Geoffrey, having learned of his mother's atrocities, drove her away. But Fabiana did not give up, and, like today, she suddenly appeared in the mansion. The Count asked how she was, how comfortable. "This is the only handmade wheelchair in the empire she loved walks," and the attending physician said that lying down for a long time was also not good. Now it became clear to Rebecca that the chain attached to the chair was equal to the radius of the garden. The Count was informed of Madame Fabiana's arrival. Geoffrey hissed and suggested that Rebecca go inside, leaving this woman to Alicia. "Everything is fine," she told her husband. "She received such a good gift. She needs to fulfill her marital duty. She will go to her mother." Canna brought the lady to the garden, in the gazebo of which Mother and Alicia were sitting. Fabiana, in her usual habit, poured out the tea, complaining of her temperature and asking if she would like another one. "Yes, Mother," the girl answered, pouring her tea for the umpteenth time. But after trying it, Madame capriciously said, "Now it's too hot." True, Alicia couldn't bear it any longer, and got up from the table, and she irritably hit the servant, venting her anger on her. Fabiana exclaimed in shock. "What was she doing?" Alicia replied. "She always didn't like the temperature of the tea. Either it was too cold or too hot, or you didn't like the aroma of the tea, then wasn't it the fault of the maid who brought the tea and water?" Madame screamed, shaming Alicia, as expected. Since her origins are low, her actions are also low. "Yes, then how noble is she," asked Alicia, "that she cannot even receive a greeting from her precious son?" Watching this, Rebecca realized that nothing had changed since then. Fabiana tried to break her daughter-in-law so that she, God forbid, would not advise her son to leave her. Now the target has simply changed. Finally, their quarrel was interrupted by Rebecca greeting her mother, whom they had not seen for a long time. The woman groaned and approached Rebecca. She heard that she was injured, yes, but the wounds were not serious. She answered and asked what happened. The Countess explained that she heard raised tones, and the frightened madam replied that it was nothing special, he was just teaching her manners. "That's how it is," she asked, and told Alicia that she needed to behave more restrained and respectful with her mother. She is, after all, the mother of their common husband. Isia tensed up, not understanding why she was standing up for this woman. As a result, everything calmed down and the tea party continued quietly, until Rebecca drank an hour with a strange aftertaste. Without taking a sip of tea, Jeffrey's mother looked at her sideways. Looking back, she saw that Alicia had not yet sipped the tea, and she deliberately pulled the tablecloth in order to drop Alicia's cup, but instead of simply dropping it, the girl spilled it all over herself. "Oh my God!" Rebecca exclaimed in shock and begged Alicia to forgive her. "Rebecca!" Alicia shouted angrily at her and asked if she did it on purpose. "Why would she do such a thing?" asked the first wife, and said that burns leave scars for a long time, advising her to hurry. Alicia ran screaming, calling for the maids to quickly prepare the ointment. Apparently, Madame was unhappy with this behavior of her first daughter-in-law. As she had expected, Rebecca said anxiously. "What had she expected?" asked Fabian. She told her mother that she had spilled the tea because Alicia had irritated her, and the woman asked if she wanted to say that she was jealous now. "Yes," Rebecca admitted, almost crying. "Asia is more beautiful than her, and she will even have a child. How can she act differently if Jeffrey loves Alicia more?" The former countess wondered what had happened to the girl who, no matter how much she tormented her, never showed her feelings and endured everything. After all, she is a woman too, so of course she is angry that her husband brought another woman. Mother carefully asked her not to worry, saying that she was the only real countess here. Rebecca admitted to her mother that when she spoke like that, she felt a little calmer. She also asked what kind of tea it was. When she drank it, she felt so calm it was she who brought it. "That's right," she asked uncertainly, and said that it was tea that she had prepared especially for her. "I asked her if she liked it, maybe I could give her some. She had a lot of it." Having accepted a jar of dried herbs from the Count's mother, Rebecca hoped that she would not have to use them. Hearing a knock on the window, Rebecca came closer and saw a sacred animal outside the window. Leo was nestled comfortably on the window. Opening the window for him, she said that she had prepared some milk in case he came. How wonderful! Canna said that cats loved this milk and hoped that he would like it. However, looking back, instead of a cat, there was a human silhouette standing behind the curtains. "Rebecca?" Julian asked in surprise, emerging from the curtains. A few hours ago, Julian received a letter from his sister congratulating him on his renewal day. Along with the note was a postcard drawn by the girl herself. Claude asked his lordship if he should return the gift this time too. "No need," Julian said heavily and said that he could go. The butler was pleased with the news. Claude left the Duke's room and the woman asked him how it went. Claude enthusiastically reported that the Duke accepted the gift and she was truly delighted. "Oh my God, Lady Lily will be so happy." "But what came over him?" the lady asked, and the guy suggested that he felt a little sorry for Lady Lily. As the night approached, the cat entered the Duke's room, sensing that Julian asked Leo to come in and asked if he wanted a drink too. But then he remembered that he eats nothing but his divine power. What a pity. Leo was completely out of his mind, he swore. Stop being sad every birthday. It sounded offensive. He should have understood his feelings. And his soulmate must console him. It was the union of a child born to produce descendants, and the immortal being who must watch these children die. The gods are so cruel. Julian asked Leo what he would become if the curse was lifted, as nothing he owned was earned with his own hands. If he is not of the sacred line of Duke Johannes, then who is he asked in despair. Leo watched indifferently as the child under his supervision wallowed in grief and jumped off the sofa. Sharing his emotions with the boy, the immortal said that this was a birthday present for him and jumped out of the window. And so, the Duke found himself in Devonshire, in the room of his future wife. Rebecca asked worriedly how he ended up here in the middle of the night, and besides, Leo had just been here. "Leo was here," Julian exclaimed in shock, realizing what the bastard had done. But the Countess immediately shut his mouth and, looking back at the door, hissed. Nodding to Rebecca, he thought he now understood what had happened. Leo, that bastard. She told him to answer quickly how he actually got here. It seems that the all-knowing Rebecca does not know this, Julian quipped. Rebecca asked if he was being sarcastic now, not knowing if he was drunk but continuing to follow him with her eyes. What was more important now was that for some reason today he looked especially lonely. What does this look like? Like an ill-mannered child? He smiled, although in her eyes he probably looked like that. She asked why he thought that. She was just looking because everyone was looking at him that way, and he hadn't had any etiquette to begin with. Because formalities like polite speech bore him, he suggested switching to informal terms, since they would soon become husband and wife anyway. Rebecca easily agreed to his conditions and said, "Okay, let's do it this way." For some reason, this amused the Duke. Although he tried to hide it, Rebecca asked why he was laughing. "It's just that," he explained. Her reaction was very different from usual. Usually girls get furious or refuse. He was getting off topic again, and Rebecca repeated the question. Julian replied that they could switch bodies. Then, she asked, "He was Leo." "Not exactly, they could change places, let's say it was a kind of teleportation." "It's surprising," she replied with a chuckle, and her reaction was not as violent as before. Didn't that surprise her? "Anything can happen in life," she replied. "She herself died and then was resurrected, so some kind of teleportation is a trifle." In response to such a calm reaction and resignation to reality, the man thought. And then he admitted that sometimes he seemed like a person who was living more than one life. She was scared, but decided not to focus on it. If he could teleport away easily, he should return home immediately. It's too dangerous here. But this was problematic. Teleportation consumed a lot of divine power, and to recover, you had to wait at least 3 hours. With a heavy sigh, Rebecca made him promise to return as soon as 3 hours had passed, and Julian agreed. Hours flew by while they talked, and then Julian brought up the topic that it was difficult for him to contact her. They could exchange letters, but it was still difficult. He asked if she couldn't go outside at all. "Well, something like that," Rebecca answered, especially now that she was pretending to be injured. "She's hurt," he exclaimed in shock. "How badly? Why didn't she tell him before?" "Quiet, don't worry," she said. She was just pretending. It just so happened that she fell down the stairs on her own. He asked why she did it, for what reason, and Rebecca answered sadly that this was the only way to gain freedom. Because a sick doll will be left alone until she gets better. Holding back his anger, he asked what he needed to do to get her a divorce within a month. It wouldn't be easy. First, she needed to save up some money. And most importantly, it takes time for the devil's claw to grow. Truly, he was inspired. Then he will solve the problem with money. Rebecca was grateful for his desire to help her free herself sooner. And burying her hand in his hair, she said to Julian, "In any case, thank you for your concern." He looked at her. His heart began to beat faster, and when she removed her hand, he suddenly grabbed it. Enjoying this moment, Julian looked straight into her eyes. Rebecca was taken aback. She looked at that beautiful face in front of her and couldn't help but succumb to temptation. This atmosphere, Rebecca thought with a gasp, not taking her eyes off him. How dangerous, she thought, but she didn't push Julian away from her. Suddenly, this moment unexpectedly ended. As if dissolving into thin air, Julian returned home, and instead of him, Leo appeared on the bed, who had been lounging on the bed until then and did not expect to be interrupted from his cat business. "Has it really been 3 hours already?" Rebecca asked in disbelief. Leo angrily beat her with his tail. Having moved home, the Duke found himself on his bed and sighed heavily. Moments of intimacy with Rebecca, her words, her gentle voice, and so on continued to appear before his eyes. Julian plopped down on the bed, breathing out in a trembling voice. He said, "Damn it." The next day, Claude sorted things out by identifying the framed person of the head of the trade guild. As he promised, the company was registered in her name, Tanya Chenister. And so what? She was indignant. She would not be a puppet, asking what he was hiding. Claude repeated that he had his reasons. Was it really that hard to listen to his brother? But his sister told him to quickly spill the beans. If he doesn't tell, she'll tell everyone. Just like last time, when she cut a tuft of Leo's fur, she left him bald, and the Duke also went bald then. What a blessing that Leo kept silent. If she tells the Duke about this, Claude screamed, he will say everything, so please, just not this. And asking his sister to listen carefully, he told the details of the case. The Count told Rebecca that he felt uneasy leaving her alone because she was hurt. If anything happened in his absence, she should inform the headmaid immediately. Rebecca agreed. And turning to Alicia, he said that if she suddenly decided to do something bad in his absence, then she should abandon this idea. "What are you saying?" she answered his husband. "Of course not." She asked him not to worry and to return the Count quickly. It was not in vain that he had been busy with her upbringing these days, the Count said with a grin, and finally left. As Kanna's investigation showed, this was the Emperor's order, and to think that Jeffrey left at such an opportune moment. Julian said he would finish it in 2 months. He was really good at keeping his promises. Today, on her way from the market, Kanna was given a note and told to deliver it to her immediately. Thanks to this, she will finally be able to meet the sender of this note. Her proxy from the trade guild wrote to her, informing her that they were ready to open. Today was a beautiful day to visit them, and a replacement maid just arrived. There was a knock at the guild building, and Tatiana ran up to the door and impatiently asked to come in. Rebecca said that she had come to meet with the head of the trading guild, and she was the head. The girl asked who she was, and then the Countess said that she had heard that she wanted to see her. Tanya was just a front person, so she asked the lady to sit here. There was a silence, but then Rebecca said that she intended to stick to her role as her business partner until the end. Therefore, that place rightfully belonged only to her. She believed in Julian's insight. But her brother had said that she was manipulating Duke Johannes as she pleased, and she had expected a fierce struggle. They didn't have much time, so she asked to get straight to the point. The only thing she was interested in was money, and she suggested dividing the odds to arrive 6-4. Tatiana shuddered and asked in whose favor the 6 was. In hers, she replied. She would only provide useful information, but all the difficulties would fall on the shoulders of the head. She agreed, but was curious about what this exclusive information was. Perhaps it would be easier with her than she thought. Rebecca handed over a list of goods, the prices of which would soon skyrocket. Since she was able to find out who she was, she believed that she could easily make a lot of money from it. But, after running her eyes over the list, Claude's sister realized that these goods were now worth nothing. The girl asked incredulously if she had the gift of foresight. Otherwise, how could she know that prices for goods would rise? So, we can say that the information is reliable. They only recorded luxury items that were popular at that time in the past life. She must establish a monopoly on ladybugs from Tamara, making it so that they can only be bought here. The discussion of business dragged on until dawn, and Tanya said that she had to, that she would definitely manage. Well, since they had discussed everything, Rebecca said that she would go. The girl asked if she could stay for another cup, and the Countess replied that she would, if possible, devote more time to her next time. And just before leaving, she asked where she should send the reports. And Rebecca asked the girl to pass them on to Julian, so that she would also be aware of the situation. "Okay," Claude's little sister answered, surprised and embarrassed. Now it seemed to her that there was something more between them than she had imagined. Julian came to an audience with the Emperor and asked how he was doing. It was surprising that he came to him like this. He never asked for an audience unless he himself called him, so that's what's happening. He heard that he would carry out the task he had given him last time flawlessly, and his gratitude was late. Julian reflected on the favors His Majesty had done him and realized that he had never done anything to truly please him. And then he informed the Emperor that from that day on, he had decided to turn away from the temple and take his side. "He will turn away from the temple?" the Emperor asked worriedly. When he tried to convince him before, he did not even flinch. "So what made him change his mind?" he answered, laughing. "Someone pushed him into action. He had been planning to destroy the temple for a long time. And yet, he was terrified, afraid that he would lose everything as soon as the blessing disappeared. Isn't it funny? He had fought all his life to escape the shadow of God, but when the chance finally came, he did not want to let go of the coins he held in his hand. Still, when I found out that she was so desperate to break free, putting herself in danger, it was like a blow to the head. It was still a secret, but one day he would find out everything. But for now, the Duke wanted to prove to His Majesty that he was truly on his side. The Emperor was always glad of such news. When they were left alone, the Duke asked if he remembered the faith of Kadir. "Does he really plan to revive her to oppose Daphne?" "Of course not," the Duke replied. "He has neither the strength nor the reason to do so, and yet they can still learn from the mistakes of history." The Church of Daphne will fall just as the Qadir centuries once fell, planting the seed of a new religion. He heard that his father had taken a fifth wife. The bride was more than 13 years younger than him, practically a child. But the catch is that this young woman was once engaged to that same famous artist of the empire, Berenices. So the Pope used his power to steal her. The emperor asked what he planned to do with it. Using his paintings to sow seeds, Duke Johannes explained, "Pictures that expose the vile deeds of the Pope and his clergy will sow distrust throughout the country. And for this he will need His Majesty's Mont Blanc Club," the Duke said. "After this there will be no turning back." It was inevitable, he told Claude. In fact, he wondered why he had put it off at all. Then the Duke looked out the window and noticed a familiar silhouette in the middle of the crowd. Rebecca, looking at the girl, he asked. The girl left her son in the kindergarten, relying on the teacher, and the son asked her to earn a lot of money. But as soon as Margaret entered the bakery, the man said that she was just in time. She had a visitor. The girl looked around in fear at the sound of footsteps. And then she saw her friend, Lady Rebecca, greeting Margaret. Looking around the room, Rebecca said what a wonderful place she had. Margaret didn't know why she came, but she informed the lady that this was her workplace, and her unannounced visit put her in an awkward position. Rebecca apologized. It was the only way to slip out of the estate, and, frankly, if she had arranged a meeting, she doubted that she would have accepted it. In the past, Margaret kept her distance and wanted nothing to do with her, but recently she learned about her past thanks to Canna. The statue of the goddess in the Hall of Light at the Earl of Devonshire's residence was actually a family heirloom passed down through Margaret's line. But when Geoffrey desired her, Baron Gideon refused to give her up, and the Count burned their entire estate to the ground. In that merciless fire, the only survivors of the Gideon family were Margaret and the unborn child in her womb, and Rebecca understood perfectly well why she didn't like her. But she asked if she could look at her here, not as a member of the Devonshire family, but as Rebecca. She said she came to offer her a job, she was opening a new business, and wanted her to become a pastry chef. Margaret was just a baker from a small town and didn't understand why she was making such an offer, since they weren't even close. "That's because," Rebecca began, even though she didn't like talking to her. "In her past life, Margaret allowed her to work in her salon. And I even helped her with home-cooked food, in fact. She is kind and selfless, and I wanted to repay her kindness." Rebecca promised that it would never be a losing deal for her, and that she would receive half of all profits as payment. Rebecca guaranteed Margaret that she would not regret joining forces with her. It was difficult for Margaret to give an answer quickly, but still. The bakery worker couldn't let Margaret's friend go empty-handed, even though she told him it wasn't necessary. But since she couldn't bring it back to the estate, she might as well try it now. After trying it, she realized how delicious it was, when suddenly someone's heavy hand fell on her shoulder. Rebecca looked back cautiously, horrified, wondering if a bloodhound was following her. But looking back, she shuddered even more. Seeing Julian in front of her, the man himself also became wary. "What are you doing here?" she said, alarmed, almost screaming. He scared her to death. The Duke admitted that he was passing by and noticed her, approached her out of curiosity, but did not want to frighten her and asked for forgiveness. There were too many eyes here, and he invited her into the carriage, but inside he thought, "Damn, I should have just walked past." But he couldn't resist wanting to tell her how brilliantly he had fulfilled her request. Suddenly, Claude called out to the Duke from outside and said that he had brought what he asked for. "Aha!" Julian asked to let him see this. Rebecca exclaimed, dismayed. It was food sold at the market. The girl remembered how she ate it as a child and how long ago it was. Julian was curious about what the food was like here, so he bought some, and since that was the case, he asked me to try it too. Unfortunately, Rebecca replied, she had to go back and invited him to eat together next time. However, her growling stomach betrayed her hunger and she felt uneasy. Her stomach didn't seem to think so. Julian offered her to eat it. It seemed to be the most delicious. Then, Rebecca agreed to allow herself just one piece. Having tried a little bit of everything, she thought, they say, the familiar taste is worse. It was even difficult to breathe. "Maybe the Count is starving her?" asked the Duke. Having eaten so little she was already full. It was amazing how all her organs fit in such a thin waist. "Organs," Rebecca repeated, laughing. "He really does speak without embarrassment." The girl's reaction was mesmerizing. Her beauty itself was incredible. And Julian, turning away in embarrassment, thought that after all, a smiling face suited her better. After meeting with the Duke, Rebecca tiredly returned to the mansion, hoping that after such a dinner the dress would suit her. Suddenly I heard the gallop of horses approaching the gate and turned around in fear. And then she saw a carriage rush past, Geoffrey's carriage. Returning, he asked the butler where Rebecca was. He answered that Madame was resting in her room. He asked if he should tell her that he had arrived. No, there was no need. Geoffrey waved him off. He would get up himself. Emperor, what is he even thinking about? The Duke thought angrily. To create a picture that insults the deity. Something strange was happening around. Why was he dragging him into this adventure, he thought, and heard a knock on the door. He tensed up. Someone entered Rebecca's room. If it was a servant, he would have greeted him first. But as soon as the man cautiously entered the room, Rebecca pounced on him, as if she had been waiting for a long time. The man, stunned, asked Rebecca if she could walk yet, and the girl awkwardly admitted that she had recently been able to do it again and had been secretly training to surprise him. Ah, his sweet Rebecca, just one look at her makes all his fatigue disappear. While hugging her, he looked closely at the room and thought that the source of the sound was Canna. Rebecca recalled that he said he would be gone for a long time, but returned early. The man frowned as he noted, his tone sounding as if she was unhappy with his early return. Of course not, Rebecca answered nervously. She was very glad that it turned out that way. He knew it was a joke, but he really would be gone for a long time. He just stopped by to pick up his things, and he needed to leave early in the morning. So, Rebecca, he asked her to spend this night with him so that the same thing as last time would not happen. Today, he would come to her. Geoffrey expected to spend the night with his wife, and Rebecca's heart was pounding wildly with fear, and her brain was working hard to avoid it. Suddenly, the Count sneezed loudly without understanding why, and as he was leaving, he said, "Well then, let's wait a little longer," and the door slammed shut. As soon as Geoffrey left, Rebecca fell to her knees in devastation, and Canna rushed to her. Madame said she was fine, even though she was a little late, and asked if she was worried, apologizing to Canna. "No," Canna answered worriedly, "but if it continues like this." But then they were interrupted by a voice from the closet. Canna apologized to Susan. Because things went wrong, she forgot about her. "Everything is fine," answered the girl dressed as the fake Rebecca. The Countess asked if she had been caught during the day. "Yes," Canna answered, taking it out of the closet. No one noticed that Susan had changed into Lady Rebecca. Rebecca thanked Susan, as she promised. She gives her the necklace that she wears. The girl thanked Madame. But nevertheless, today, Rebecca achieved all her goals and even met with Julian. She hadn't had such a pleasant dinner for a long time. But, having caught herself thinking this, the girl realized, trouble, this feeling is a little dangerous. Late in the evening, Geoffrey thought about the smell of sweat. Rebecca definitely smelled of sweat. As long as she lived in this mansion, she should have no reason to sweat. Besides, he noticed more than once that she strangely avoided his gaze and looked at him coldly. Strangely enough, they did not receive any strange reports from the servants. Right, he realized. It all started with that victory banquet, and Rebecca's attitude had changed since then. She acted like she wanted to leave him. Damn, the Count was worried about his doll. To be prepared for the unexpected, it doesn't hurt to be prepared. He rang the bell to summon the head maid, and Grace appeared immediately. And then the Count asked her if she remembered what he had done a long time ago. It seemed it would be needed much sooner. As night approached, he came down from the 3rd floor, heading to his first wife's room. However, in the dark corridor I came across Alicia, who was still awake at that hour. Alicia said she could feel the baby moving. He must have sensed his father had returned. "Didn't he also want the child to hear his father's voice?" she asked, squeezing the Count. How strange, Geoffrey thought, stunned. Had Alicia always been this beautiful? He first met Alicia in a village on the border, where he came in search of an artist. A thrifty girl, she looked quite pleasant to look at, but it was just a passing fancy, that's all. He didn't make any promises to her for the future. But soon his own wife brought a girl to him, wanting to introduce her to him. He again met the girl with whom he spent the night. She happily met the Count. To his surprise, Alicia turned out to be a much more persistent woman than he thought. Even when she became a maid in this house, she wondered if he didn't think she was beautiful. True, it was just curiosity, but then he heard that she was pregnant. Then he felt like she had stolen the child he and Rebecca were supposed to have. But now he thought that he could love this child. It was strange, he thought as he looked at the Countess's room, but right now it wasn't Rebecca. But even so, he invited Alicia to come into the room. Canna, having listened to the conversation, reported to Lady Rebecca that, as she had said, the Count had entered Alicia's room. So, Rebecca thought with a sigh of relief, Alicia had taken that advice today. She wanted to get it anyway, so she should actively use what she has. It was something that she didn't have, but she asked what it could be. Now, for a whole month, he will leave on the orders of the Emperor, and when he returns, the world that Jeffrey created will already begin to collapse. Early in the morning, the wives went out to see Jeffrey off on a month-long business trip. Even earlier, Kana came to Jeffrey and reported that Lady Rebecca had been crying all night, looking for him. This reaction stirred Jeffrey's feelings, and he said that before leaving, he wanted to give something to his wives. The girls looked at their husband in surprise, anticipating what he wanted to give them. But then, since the girls' hands were shackled, Alicia started to get worked up, screaming at the Count. He said the headmaid had the key and would only remove the handcuffs briefly in case of emergency. Well then, as a parting word, he told his wives to wait patiently for his arrival. Rebecca had a more submissive reaction, but she also deeply disliked having her freedom restricted. Robert arrived faithfully to Lady Rebecca and reported that he had returned. Rebecca asked if there was any progress. He noticed the handcuffs and thought that the Count's unhealthy obsession had flared up again. He failed to obtain the precise physical evidence the lady had mentioned. However, he found someone who could provide information, a man who had escaped from the island. The place where Jeffrey holds the people he kidnapped hostage, a place from which they cannot escape, and from which even their families cannot find them. He heard a rumor about a madman who claims to have escaped from the island. Perhaps this man has the clue they are looking for. But he missed it. If she gave him time, he would definitely find it. It was a pity, thought Rebecca. She hoped that he would bring a clue about the island. Deciding to take a different route, Rebecca turned to Robert and asked if he was a good liar. "Excuse me?" he asked, and then Rebecca gave the order to spread the rumor among the hounds. "The rumor is that she is a saint. She has received God's grace and can see the future. She can also clearly see the past," she said, phrases that should be spread. At the same time, Yustafa's greenhouse research achieved success, and he trembled with happiness, not believing it. At last, he exclaimed, not daring to rejoice enough, he would be free from the Duke's irritating moralizing. A month ago, Julian provided excellent research facilities for free. The Duke asked him not to worry about anything else and to concentrate on his research. As a result, he encountered servants bringing delicious food and the kindness of the Duke, who was ready to help. And just being here, Yustaf understood that this place was paradise. When he signed the contract, he was worried about the bad reputation he had about his bad character, but it seems like it was all just rumors. Suddenly, his sleep was interrupted by a loud slam of the door. The fury in the slam could be felt even from a distance. As the Duke approached, he asked if he had time to sleep now, which Yustaf asked. He was about to take a short nap after a sleepless night when the Duke gave him a 2-month deadline. He had to grow the devil's claws in 2 months before they could be used. And with such a sudden visit from the Duke, Yustafa's hell came to this heavenly place. He became enraged and pestered him constantly. Several days were downright unbearable, without sleep or food. Now he had definitely decided that all the rumors he had heard were an embellished version. All aristocrats were the same. If it weren't for the contract, he would have left long ago. But now, the genius Yustaf has done it, and in just a month, now he will wipe the nose of this Duke who tormented him. He mentioned the devil, and here he came abruptly, straight away. He asked if the devil's claws were ready. Yes, he answered tiredly, but joyfully, and asked the Duke if he wanted to check. Julian asked how to take it, Yustaf explained. Just pick a fresh leaf and eat it. He praised the researcher for his productive work and gave him some money for his efforts. Looking at the huge bag, he thought with gratitude at how much money was there. And then Julian apologized. It seems he was too rude because the matter was urgent. Yustafa was very surprised that he was apologizing and thought that maybe he wasn't such a bad, crazy person after all. Well then, let's get back to work, he said joyfully. The murderous words. What? The man asked. Isn't the research into the devil's claws finished? The Duke asked what he was saying. He still had a lot to research. Did he know about the rose grape? Is this really the same variety that the Count patented? Yes, the Duke replied. Research a way to make this grape poisonous. The deadline is a week. And yet, he is simply crazy, the devil, Yustaf thought in horror. This man is the devil. The Hound asked Robert how the surveillance of Madame was going. There was nothing to report, but during the surveillance he realized something. He asked if the lady was a saint by any chance, the third one asked him. Robert asked if he remembered how last time, while working in the mansion, he was struck by lightning. It happened a few minutes after Madame said so. Madame could see the future. She must be a saint. Besides, she has a beautiful appearance and a kind character. All the conditions come together. Yes, he's completely lost his mind. It's just a coincidence. Don't talk nonsense. No, another one interrupted him. She's definitely a saint. He saw it too. Not long ago, Madame came to him and said, "Rodrigo, be careful with everything that concerns the sky." "What?" he asked, stunned, but that was all she could tell him. And as she was leaving, she asked Kana, or perhaps herself, why the gods send trials to good people. And, literally the next moment, a vase almost fell on him. It's good that the servant shouted, warning him. The words she said to him confirmed that Madame really did have the gift of foresight. Henry asked why they still didn't know about Madame Rebecca's abilities. She told Rodrigo that it was a test given to her to be with the Count. So her abilities only manifest when the Count is not around, right? The Count is definitely a test. That same night, a man entered the room and Rebecca asked Rodrigo to come in. Okay, now that he had arrived, she asked if he had decided who he would pledge allegiance to, having acquired another ally. All this time, Jeffrey carried out the Emperor's orders, watching and guarding the artist. He thought with disappointment about what he was doing. He thought that he had been put in charge of watching the artist, but in fact he himself became a prisoner. Flopping tiredly onto the bed, he said, "This is no different from exile." He took out a locket with a picture of his wife. Rebecca had finally recovered, and he had to waste time in such a place. He needed to pass the time somehow, and then he noticed a canvas located in the corner. After some time, an artist came to him and noticed that Jeffrey was drawing Madame. He looked encouragingly at his supervisor's work, waiting for an answer, without criticizing himself. Jeffrey awkwardly covered his work and replied, he didn't draw it to show anyone. If there is no one to look at the painting, it is as good as dead, and notice the presence of talent in the Count in this area. Compared to the teacher's work, this is just trash. But how could he say that about a painting that had so much love put into it? The artist asked. The Count, alarmed, asked, "Wait, but how did you know that he was drawing Rebecca? Are there any artists who don't know the Countess? How many artists have wanted to make her their muse since childhood?" And indeed, he said thoughtfully, looking at the Count. Jeffrey, frightened, asked what he was doing. Madame and the Count are very similar. He has a beautiful face that an artist like him would want to paint. The wrinkles on the forehead are also in ideal proportions. And the eyes are like the sea, clear and transparent, and the nose. But then Jeffrey interrupted him, swinging and shouting, "Stop it. He is not a work of art. What kind of rude behavior is this?" "Okay, no," the artist replied, but instead he asked to listen to his request. Since he agreed to paint, locked in this place, he had to learn something in return. He asked to become his muse. "What?" the Count asked, stunned, and Berenice asked if he wanted to become the main character of the greatest masterpiece. Jeffrey shouted and asked if he was now asking him to be a model for a blasphemous painting, if he looked like a fool. Berenice asked how many people he thought would know that he was the model, and he didn't like to draw everything as it was. The man was serious and asked how he felt about his proposal. Jeffrey was excited to become a model for a painting by that same famous Berenice. Moreover, after taking a quick look at his work, he felt that it would be a masterpiece. It will probably be such a beautiful piece that it will be talked about for generations and will be captured on this greatest masterpiece. Yes, the work will still be published anonymously, and even if someone recognizes him, he will simply deny it. And even if it takes a little time, the artist grinned, having persuaded the Count. "Just think," this idiot agreed. Julian chuckled after reading Berenice's message. He hoped that by locking Jeffrey away this time, he would at least feel a little of the pain that Rebecca was experiencing. What remorse! He's not even fit for recycling. He asked Claude to pass this on to Berenice. And he said that perhaps it would be worthwhile to assign more people to Jeffrey, so much so that it would be disgusting for him to even breathe there. Having given Claude the task, Julian poured himself a glass of wine and walked around the office, looking out the window. He was curious about what Rebecca was doing now, and her image popped into his head. But, succumbing to his feelings, he forgot about the side effects of the divine curse. As soon as the pain in his chest intensified, he instantly rushed to the desk drawer and poured pills into his hand. With trembling hands, he threw them into his mouth, and sitting down on a chair, he breathed a sigh of relief. The influence of the curse was becoming stronger and stronger. It was necessary to get rid of the curse, and to do this, Rebecca had to be rescued from the county as soon as possible. Devonshire family wine and rose grapes, yes. He took the bottle in his hand. He could handle it. Even if he comes back, he won't be able to see Rebecca normally, Geoffrey Devonshire. By that time, only 6 hounds had been bribed according to her data. There were 13 hounds in the mansion. Among them are the Nightblade, who cannot be lured away, the head maid Grace, and the butler Octavian. Excluding them, more than half of those on her side, all 6 of those bribed had one thing in common: their loved ones were being held hostage. They easily switched to her side when she said that she had the key to salvation. The problem was with the remaining 4. They say that 3 of them are in complex debt relationships, and she was unable to figure out the weakness of the last one at all. Rebecca thought seriously about what she should do with them. Suddenly, Alicia's cry was heard, saying that she was in pain and ordering that she be released immediately. The Count ordered not to remove the handcuffs unless absolutely necessary. Alicia screamed, "If this is not absolutely necessary, then what is?" "These handcuffs are lined with the highest quality silk, so unless you try to force them off, there won't be any scratches like that," Grace explained. But she was carrying the Count's heir. She knew that excessive stress was harmful. She threatened the maid and ordered her release in a good way. This is an unspoken rule. She asked to follow them if she wants to continue to stay in this beautiful mansion. The Count gave her full powers to punish her if necessary, but taking into account her position, she will not do this. "You will regret what happened today," Alicia snorted indignantly and went into the room. Attentive Grace smirked, having gotten her way and rightfully feeling the power in this place. And she looked back at Rebecca, who had been watching them from the bottom floor of the stairwell all this time. Crossing paths with the Countess on the stairs, Grace warned Madame only twice. "What?" Rebecca asked, tense and anxious, not understanding why this was said. And then the maid explained she was talking about how many times she turned a blind eye to Madame's mistakes. The first time she tried to deceive her by dressing up as a maid. The second time she dressed up as Susan, went to the market, and returned late. Did she really think that something could happen in the Count's mansion that she didn't know about? Rebecca swallowed hard, along with the rising apprehension. Goosebumps ran through her body, and she asked if she should thank her for this. "No," Grace answered. When her daughter was unconscious due to an incurable disease, thanks to her, the madam who convinced the Count, she was able to see the last moments of her life. So, in gratitude for this, she decided to help her 3 times. Therefore, she will not report this rumor about the saint separately to the Count, she condescendingly informed. That wouldn't count as one of the wishes, so she didn't have to worry, for she was too perfect. This look seriously frightened her and transferred her to another person, as if. And without keeping silent, Rebecca said it bluntly, "She speaks in the same manner as he does, as if she is the boss here. Is it possible the owners of this place are undoubtedly the Devonshires? She just has a special attachment to this place." "Okay," Rebecca replied, clinking her chains. She will always be grateful for her devoted service. "So?" she asked as she left. She had one chance left to help her, right? And now, knowing about this possibility, Rebecca told the woman not to forget about this promise. Entering the room, Rebecca heard a man's scream mixed with a woman's. "How dare she?" He told her to listen to him. "Oh my God!" Rebecca cried out in fear and called out to Canna, Julian, in a fierce struggle. And, breaking into a scream, she asked 2 of her faithful confidants what they were doing here. Upon seeing Rebecca, Julian immediately pushed Canna aside and ran up to her. He hid behind her like a child, not a grand duke, and asked if this woman was by any chance an escort knight. And Canna, seeing this man for the first time, angrily asked if she knew him. Rebecca sighed heavily and said that she would now formally introduce them. She introduced Julian to Canna, who, although she had the skills of a knight, was her maid. And Canna introduced Julian, the very same Duke Johannes. And after that she told them to shake hands and say that they were glad to meet each other. However, after the first impression of each other, they did not even want to touch each other. After wiping his hands, Julian told Rebecca that they needed to talk alone. "It's impossible," Canna answered rudely, either jealous of Madame or despising the man she had chosen. Then the Countess hastened to reassure her friend. Everything was fine, she said. This man was not dangerous. Only in this case did Kana agree, but if anything happened, she asked her to scream immediately, and she would come running. Honestly, Rebecca begged, you better not come without warning, Julian apologized. It was urgent. What's the matter? The girl asked then. Devil's claw, Julian said with a satisfied grin. He raised it. True, Rebecca asked, stunned and impatient when he could bring it. Right now, the man proudly declared, looking at Panacea. Today we need to pick the leaves. This color, Rebecca exclaimed excitedly, and the shape of the leaf, it really is the devil's claw. The Duke drawled and asked, is that really all? Rebecca asked in surprise. He pouted, saying he had worked so hard to get it, so is this really all the gratitude he deserves? What? The girl asked uncertainly. What does he want? What do you mean? What? Julian asked, grabbing her hand. And hanging over Rebecca, as if flirting, he explained what they hadn't finished last time. Wait, she stopped him, embarrassed. They're not married yet. She knew he was in his prime now. What is she talking about? Julian asked, not catching up. And he explained that he wanted her to stroke him, and he put her hand on his head, and from such a desire, Rebecca fell into a greater stupor. And Julian, laughing, asked what she had imagined that made her face turn red. And what could she have imagined? She asked. The guy asked. But didn't she have any dirty thoughts? Why did she react so violently? But brushing aside the jokes, he basked in her hand on his head. Julian admitted that no one had ever stroked his head like that, and no one ever thanked him with such delight in their voice. After some tenderness and gratitude, Rebecca approached and sniffed the man, and he shuddered and asked what she was doing. There is no smell of alcohol. Did he really not get drunk this time? She was indignant. Unfortunately, the Duke replied, he is completely sober. Yustaf said, Julian passed on, that if she ate this, she would feel severe pain. That's right, knowing the properties of Panacea, Rebecca answered. Besides, you'll also become weaker, blisters will appear, and a disgusting smell. And the appearance will become so terrible that everyone will want to avoid you. The Duke asked if she was afraid. But Rebecca had already sworn to herself that she would never run away again. She would either take revenge and see things through to the end, or die. Is there anything in that case that would make her hesitate? The girl asked. And having finished speaking, at that very moment she grabbed the devil's claw with her bare hands, tearing off several sheets of paper. If she touches it with her bare hands, Julian exclaimed worriedly. However, it was too late to stop Rebecca without a second's hesitation. She swallowed the Panacea sheets. Thank God, now that Jeffrey returns, I can safely avoid sharing my bed with him. What? Julian said, alarmed and frightened. Rebecca offered him a cup of tea. At such a time, no one would come into her room anyway. He was shaking with anger, and he said that he had just remembered that he needed to do something. Rebecca didn't even have time to answer, inviting him to stay for just a minute. At that very moment, instead of the Duke, Leo appeared in front of her, greeting the Countess. Rebecca sighed. He said that you need to wait 3 hours to change your appearance. The time has not passed yet. She asked sadly why Julian had lied to her that day. But I decided that it wasn't that important, and flopping down on the bed, I quickly fell asleep hugging Leo. That day she had a dream in which she walked endlessly through an endless tunnel. But she was not afraid, and in the end, she heard a voice calling her name. Rebecca! Rebecca! The name continued to ring in her ears, and the girl quickened her pace. And at the exit from the tunnel, she was illuminated by warm, blinding sunlight. When Julian approached her right in the flower field, sleep was a great help to her in coping with the pain that was developing from Panacea's poison. By that time, Leo had already left her through the open window, and the Duke had entered Berenice's house. He reasoned that if he killed Jeffrey right now, everything would become much easier. Rebecca would be able to avoid living with this daily pain, and if she became a widow, he would be able to marry her sooner. But he had no right to punish this bastard. Rebecca herself had to do it. Julian was about to leave without having done anything to the Count, when suddenly, in his sleep, he called Rebecca. Anger boiled inside him from the Count's unhealthy obsession. His fists itched, and he thought, Rebecca would understand this. A strong blow landed on Jeffrey's cheek, causing a loud scream to echo throughout the house. The Count, putting his cold hand to his cheek, looked out the open window in shock, not understanding what had happened.